We are people who understand that when I'm given the opportunity to pursue a dream, that I can do it. And unfortunately, where we are in our country right now, it's not foreign competition that hurts us. It's our own government that hurts us. We tax them too high, we regulate them too much, and then we criticize them when they say, I've got to go offshore to survive. Not to thrive, but to survive. This piece of legislation brings jobs back here to the United States of America, where Americans work. It doesn't drive them offshore. It increases the ability of every single American to have more money in her or his pocket to take care of their families. What in the world are we arguing about? I will never, ever give up on who this country is and who we are as a people. When America faces a problem offshore, they don't turn and run from it. They stare it down and they find a way to work their way through it. It doesn't matter how the debt got there right now because it's already there. And I agree with Mr. Renacci. We're chasing a rabbit we can't catch. This is a revenue bill. It's not a spending bill. It is a revenue bill, and we're trying to figure out the revenue is provided by hard-working American taxpayers. It's not provided by some other entity. Isn't that who we should be working for? Not blue states or red states, but the United States. Shouldn't we be looking at every single citizen when we go home and say, we tried to lighten your load today, we tried to make sure that your future could be brighter, that your children's future can be brighter, and that you can have a more stable life going into your golden years. Because the only thing true about the golden years right now is you don't have a lot of gold, it's not going to be very golden. And we've taken that ability away from people because of the way we tax them and the way we regulate them. Can we please talk about rebuilding America, making America great again? Not for just the rich, but for every single American. My God, folks, that's what we're here for. We represent different parties, but it's all the same people. Those folks in our districts, I represent Pennsylvania's 3rd District. They're not all Republicans. Most of them are blue-collar Democrats. And they're looking at what we're doing and what we're not doing for them. So let's just stay on the message here, and let's make it a little better life for every single American. We can do it. We can do it. We've done it before. We can do it again.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Levin, you recognize to speak on the amendment.
Well, I think it's good, Mr. Chairman, that we're bringing some passion into this, and the previous speaker speaks with passion. And so I hope you understand if we speak with passion. The purpose of this amendment is to spotlight what this is all about. It's been said that Mr. Barthold talked about every group on average benefiting. But when you go beyond the averages, it's very clear that this is the opposite of a middle-class tax cut. The Speaker said the focus is on middle-class tax relief. The focus is on directing the tax relief to the people in the middle and the people who are trying to get there. And that is why we put our emphasis on that tax relief for those people who are in the middle. When it comes to AMT, it's the opposite. When it comes to pass-through, it's the opposite. When it comes to the estate tax, as we discussed yesterday, it's the opposite. And as we have new data, it also shows as to the individual taxpayer, it's also the opposite. We asked yesterday for there to be a breakdown in terms of these income categories. And so this is what this breakdown shows. And I read this. In 2023, 24.6% of taxpayers between $75,000 and $100,000 will see a tax increase. In 2023, 20.1% of taxpayers between $50,000 and $75,000 will see a tax increase. In 2025, it gets worse. 26.7% of taxpayers between $75,000 and $100,000 will see a tax increase. In 2025, 21.4% of taxpayers between $50,000 and $75,000 will see a tax increase. That's why we feel so passionate. That's why we felt yesterday when there was an amendment provided that we had never seen before, we became passionate because all the facts have to be brought out. And what the Speaker said in describing this was simply not true. And I want to just say one thing. This is a revenue bill. This is also a spending bill. Because when you increase the deficit, as you're doing, it will impact in terms of spending. And this is what the Republican budget did or proposed, citing the deficit. The budget would further cut $800 billion from non-defense discretionary spending while leaving the official defense budget alone. And I want to read this fact, that in 2023, the amount would be the lowest level of discretionary spending relative to GDP in more than a half a century. So essentially what the Republicans plan to do with this increase in deficit is begin to cut Medicaid more, Medicare more, education more, health care more, training more, as they propose in their budget. So this is a spending as well as a revenue bill. And when it comes to revenue, it's totally irresponsible. It's irresponsible. And the notion that it's basically for the middle class is untrue. It's untrue. I was taught as a kid not to use the word lie, so I'll use the word fib. That's Irish. It's Irish? I may have had an Irish ancestor. It's a fib. It's a big fib. And so don't say that Mr. Barthold said on average everybody gets a benefit, and he didn't say everybody. On average people do, because everybody doesn't, even those in some years according to the first table and now to the facts. So this amendment of Mr. Blumenauer says after 2 years we need to take a look, right, Mr. Blumenauer? After 2 years, we need to take a look. And all the facts indicate that if this were ever to pass, and I don't think it will, it would be a miserable development, we need to take another look in 2 years.
The gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Reid, you're recognized to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I wanted to focus in on some of my colleagues and on this amendment's issue on the issue of growth and the denial or the argument that it's foo-foo dust, I think is what I heard my colleagues on the other side indicate. But before I do that, Mr. Chairman, I do want to agree with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and their concern that they're raising on the deficit and the national debt crisis. And I hope we will be able to point to today many times in the future, as we continue to address the debt crisis here in America, that my colleagues will be reminded of this tape, of this video, when they speak on the issue of deficits and debts in the future. And I would share that passion to address the debt as it has become a crisis-level event. But, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I want to focus on the growth argument and how somehow my colleagues on the other side just cannot accept the fact that lowering taxes will lead to growth. Because if I've got it right as a former mayor, there's not a state in this union, Mr. Chairman, that their governors are not proposing tax incentive proposals across the nation, and those tax incentive proposals are primarily relying on reducing taxes for economic development and jobs. I have traveled this country, and I've sat in hotel rooms as I've traveled around, and I watched this commercial come on about New York State when I'm all over the union. New York State's open for business. Our governor is out championing across the world how he has an economic development proposal that's going to lower taxes and incentivize businesses to come to New York and grow and grow and grow. And I can point to each one of my colleagues on this dais, and I cannot find one state in this union that doesn't have an economic development policy that is cornered and keyed upon the issue of tax relief, tax reduction to encourage growth in our local neighborhoods. But you know the difference, and I want to speak to the American people, The difference between those proposals and what we're proposing here is those proposals empower government bureaucrats, local officials, to control your money and decide who gets to get rewarded with those tax reductions. What essentially we're doing, which is a different philosophy, is saying, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, this is your money. This is your money that we want you to spend and invest where you choose to do it. That's why the tax relief to me is so important in this bill. Because those individuals that earn that money, that start those small businesses like I did, they're the ones that lead to long-term growth. They're the ones that are better suited to decide where to invest their money across this economy and across this nation. Not some bureaucrat, not some empowered local official who is trying to incentivize economic growth by reducing taxes, which I agree is the philosophy to adhere to, but we're going to empower the people to make that decision. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to yield to my good friend from Ohio, Mr. Renacci, who had some thoughts on these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. And I wanted to go back to my good friend, Mr. Kind. As we were walking across the street yesterday, we were talking about a number of things. And first off, I want to apologize for the Packers' loss. I know that was a big issue for you. And I was thinking of you last night. That's why I say I have a lot of friends over on the other side. I was actually thinking I really wasn't rooting for either team, but I was kind of leaning toward
Jim, it's nothing that a tax cut can't cure for the Packers.
But anyway, I do want to go back to one of your comments because I think it's important. You know, I sit on a budget committee, and one of the most frustrating things for me is that as someone on the budget committee, we have passed budget after budget after budget, and we're still running debt after debt after debt. And you mentioned during President Clinton's presidency that we balanced the budget, and I went back to look at how we balanced the budget. The truth of it is we spent double what we budgeted for those 6 years, which a lot of people aren't aware of. So we broke the budget. By the way, we've broken the budget since 1974, which many Americans back home don't even realize.
Frightening news out of Kentucky over the weekend. Republican Senator Rand Paul was assaulted outside his home. We learned this morning that the injuries he sustained are worse than originally thought. An advisor to the senator tells CNN he has 5 rib fractures, including 3 displaced fractures
by almost $5 trillion during the period of time. So again, every once in a while, Washington gets lucky, but it's not because Washington did something. It's because we had a unique situation. And I wanted to make sure you were aware of that. We do need to look at our budget and get some balance into it. And I yield back to Mr. Reid.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Thompson is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. You know, my friend from California, when he was speaking, said that this amendment kills this bill. This amendment doesn't kill anything. The only thing this amendment does is says we're going to look at it down the road, and if it's not working, we're going to stop it. And wouldn't we all like to be able to stop it if it's not working? One of the problems we have here, something that doesn't work continues to go and continues to go and continues not to work. This is a prime opportunity by adopting this amendment to be able to stop it and fix it. He also said that the difference between those of us on this side of the dais and those on the other side of the dais is his side of the dais believes that this is legislation that's going to work. Well, this is a pretty important committee, and we've got a lot of very, very smart people supporting us, and we don't have to rely on what we believe. We can actually get the data, we can get the facts, the true fact, not the alternative facts, the true facts, and we can base our arguments and base our legislation on good, solid data. And if you do that, there's a couple of things that you can glean from this. Number one, this bill adds $2.3 trillion to the national debt. If this happens, it's going to hurt the people that we represent. It's going to hurt the local governments that we represent. It's going to cause us to have to come back and look at cuts to everything from infrastructure to crime to opioids to Medicare. And that doesn't help anybody that any one of us represents on this dais. The fact of the matter is we have put in place in those 4 years over the last 20 that the Democrats were in charge in this House, we did put in place checks on the runaway debt and the runaway deficit. It was called PAYGO. And the first thing that the Republicans did when they regained the House is they took away the PAYGO requirement from the tax side of policy. And yes, taxes and cutting taxes is, in fact, spending. If you cut taxes, you're spending money. In this case, you guys are spending $2.3 trillion that we don't have, and that bill is going to be sent to our children and to our grandchildren. And that is not balancing the books. To, I think it was Mr. Renese's point on, or Mr. Reid's point on what New York did, states have a constitutional requirement that they have to balance their books. We don't have that here. We need to make every effort to see that we do it. My friend from Ohio talked about helping the middle class. Well, this article that appeared today in the paper was already referenced once, but I want to read the opening statement here. It says, nearly half of all middle-class families would pay more taxes in 2026 than they would under current rules if the proposed House tax bill became law. About one-third would pay more in 2018. It's a striking finding for a bill promoted as a middle-class tax cut. This is not a middle tax cut. And believe me, I want to see this. I want to see the middle-class working families in my district and every other district represented on this dais and throughout the House see an increase in the amount of money that they have in their pocket. This bill doesn't do it. So those police and firefighters that my friend from Ohio was talking about, believe me, I've got one of each. One son a firefighter, one son a police officer. I'd like to see more money in their pocket. But this bill does the exact opposite. It increases taxes for many of the middle-class working families in this country. I might understand why my friend from Ohio is pushing this. You know, his state gets money from the donor states across the country, and we need to make sure that we keep that in perspective as well. California is a big donor state. You start cutting these or taking away tax opportunities for constituents in many of the states represented here, what happens is we pay more and get back less. And that's not incredibly fair at all if we're talking about fairness in this tax bill. We want to see fair tax reform that helps the middle-class working families and works from the middle class out. This bill does just the opposite and adds $2.3 trillion to our debt.
Mr. Kerbel, you're recognized to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank my colleague from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, for shining a light on this issue. Especially for a lot of young Americans, this is a major concern, and the truth is that even setting aside this legislation, the current situation with regards to our deficit and our debt is not sustainable. And I think there's a lot that we can do on this committee working together to address that very serious challenge, not just to our national security, but really to our economic security and to our viability as a nation. Now, addressing our serious fiscal issues doesn't mean we have to turn our backs on the median four-person household, the typical family in all of the congressional districts represented on this committee, and truly the typical family in our country. The statistics show that there's relief for every American family, the median American family that we all represent here. And my colleague from Oregon's district, about $2,300 per family, and a lot of benefits for those who don't itemize. Lower and middle income Americans, approximately two-thirds in his district. And if we go down the list, we'll see the same in every district represented on this committee and in every district in our country. Also, there's a lot in this bill that is important in the sense of growing our economy. and making it more likely that we can work together to address our fiscal challenges. A lot of Americans are worried, rightly so, about American corporations and foreign corporations exploiting our existing laws and existing rules to shift jobs and profits overseas, and Americans are being left behind. We don't have to turn our backs on all of that just because we also should address the fiscal challenges that we're facing as a country. So I don't think that this design works well. I don't think that this is the broad solution we need to build a fiscally sustainable future for all Americans, especially for younger generations who worry about what our future may look like. But I think we can do both. I think we can help the typical family in our country, that family of 4, 5, 6, that is struggling, that hasn't experienced the economic recovery that so many people read about and that so many talk about on television. We can do that. We can also reform our tax code to make sure that American companies are doing right by the American worker, that American companies are doing more to invest in our country. And
folks, we are going to step away, take you out to New Jersey. The Republican governor candidate is speaking now.
Mike Guadagno, my oldest son Kevin Guadagno, my middle child, but the best, and I always say that, Michael Guadagno again, and then the youngest is Anderson. He took the day off to be with us here to vote today, and just went inside my polling place. And you know, let me make a quick note. The reason why we're voting here is because when Sandy took out the town, it also took out the polling place, and we've been voting here at the parish center ever since because of the destruction this town saw during Sandy. So in case you're wondering why you're voting in the parking lot of a church. Any questions? It's being repaired. Who did I vote for? Let's think. I voted for myself because I believe I'm the best candidate, right?
Are you feeling pretty confident?
We're feeling fabulous. You know, the momentum really picked up in the last couple of weeks, and we've really felt it on the ground. We've been on a bus for 5 days talking to the people of New Jersey, and they say the same thing. They can't afford more taxes, and they can't afford a less safe state. So we're feeling very excited about today.
Brenda?
Hi, Brenda. Poor Brenda was on the bus with us just about the entire 5 days. Thank you, Brenda.
So the polls, in your estimation, are they showing the race tightening up?
I think absolutely they're showing them tightening up, but the only poll that really counts is tonight's poll. And when the polls close at 8 o'clock tonight, I anticipate being the governor-elect of the state of New Jersey. That's what it's all about.
Ms. Sloan?
Kim, we spoke a few times over the last 5 days. Out of the 120 towns, what really stuck out in your mind that's resonating most across New Jersey?
People can't afford to live here anymore, and they're concerned that their families won't be able to stay here. They're concerned that their grandkids won't be able to be raised here. Look, I moved here 27 years ago. I married a guy who was born and raised in New Jersey. I moved all around the country before I went to law school, and I moved here so that I didn't have to move all around the country. So I feel for all of those people that will have to pay higher taxes and have a less state if my opponent is elected. This campaign has always been about affordability from the day we decided to run until tonight at 8 o'clock and for the next 4 years after that. It's all going to be making sure my family can stay here and raise their families here, and the residents of New Jersey's families can stay here, and that's what we saw.
Has Governor Christie reached out to you at all, wished you luck? Has President Trump, anyone reached out to you?
I can tell you the governor has, yes. But
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Hey, Greg Kelly.
One more. Tell us what's so great about Monmouth Beach.
I knew that was coming, Greg. Ricky gets nervous when people ask offline questions like that, but I knew, Greg, you were going to ask that question because I've lived all my New Jersey life here in Monmouth Beach. My husband bought a piece of property here in 1985, a little piece of postage, 81. Welcome to the first. You have to follow the script.
I'm helping.
So, Greg, we moved here and bought a little tiny piece of property, and he built the house by himself, literally brick by brick, which means it was never finished. And even after we got married in the church right behind you, we continued to build that house. We bought the other piece of property behind us. We, two-income families. We had an opportunity to buy property at a time when nobody wanted to buy property on the water in '92. And we also built that house brick by brick together. And we had each one of the 3 children, where are you? Right, standing right here. Everyone was baptized in the church behind us. That's what Monmouth Beach is about. You know, it's a great place to live, work, and raise a family, and you know that. Yes, thank you.
Just tell us what did Governor Christie tell you?
Oh, yeah, so I would change my methodology now the day of the election. No. Good try, Brenda.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
That is Kim Guadagno running for governor of New Jersey. Some key races happening today, not only in New Jersey, but also in Virginia. We'll keep an eye on those polls as they get a little bit closer. Now let's take you out to some Senate Republicans talking about the tax cut bill.
They want to serve their customers. They represent so many other small businesses around the state of Indiana and around this country. If we want to continue to grow jobs in this country, if we want those businesses, like my business, to compete for workers so that their wages rise, if we want rank and file Americans to be able to keep more of their hard-earned money, then we must act now. This is our opportunity. And our lodestar, our guiding light should be to make sure that every American can keep more of their hard-earned money. Let's get to work. Let's get this done.
Thank you. John Hogan.
Thank you, David. We're talking about empowering hardworking Americans. We're talking about empowering small business. I come from an ag state. There's 16 million people in this country that are either involved in farming and ranching or indirectly involved in farming and ranching. And that's the epitome of small business. You're talking family business when you're talking farming and ranching. And so when we look at this tax cut, it's not just about making sure that people keep more of their hard-earned dollars after tax, the hardworking American taxpayers, but it's really about empowering, energizing, and injecting capital into small business across this country. And small business is the backbone of our economy. And so as we work on this, we want to make sure that that's exactly what we're doing. We're making sure that they have more capital to invest in their farm, in their ranch, in their small business, in plant and equipment. Because then what do? They hire more people. When they hire more people, there's a demand for labor. And when there's a demand for labor, what happens? Wages and income go up. So for every hardworking American out there, it's not just about keeping more of your money after tax. It's about raising wages and income in this great country.
Senator John Kennedy.
Thank you, David. This is what tax reform is about. This is all it's about. There are 2 groups of policymakers I have found in Washington. And I'm not talking about Democrats and Republicans. There are those who believe, as I do, and we do, in more freedom. And there are those who believe in more free stuff. This bill's about freedom. It's about allowing individuals and American businesses to keep more of the money they earn. I believe, and I think many of my colleagues here believe, that people and businesses can spend the money they earn better than government can. And that's all this legislation is about. For an individual, a mom and dad getting up every day, going to work, obeying law, paying their taxes, trying to do the right thing by their kids. It's about giving them more freedom by giving them more of their money and letting them keep more of their money. For our business women and our businessmen, it's about incenting them to take that extra money and invest in new plants and new machinery and new equipment and new software. Now, what is that going to do? It's going to create jobs, but for the current employees, it's going to make them more productive and cause wages to go up. I happen to believe, and I think history bears me out, that a country cannot tax, spend, and regulate itself into prosperity. And that's what we've been trying to do for the next decade. And it hasn't worked. People say, well, that's the way it's done in Washington. You don't understand. That's the way it's done around here. And my response to that is, well, the way we've been doing it sucks. Maybe we ought to try a different approach.
And with that, that concludes our prepared remarks. I think we'll take a few questions. Before we do, I just want to thank our outside supporters and all the work you guys have done. I want to thank Kellyanne for hanging around today and all the work you're doing. And Mr. Secretary, thank you for being gracious enough to stay around and handle all the questions today. So with that, we'll take some questions, sir.
You say that this tax bill, that this tax plan will affect everybody. So why isn't this more of a bipartisan issue?
I'll tackle that one first. Well, I think it is. We're working with both sides right now, trying to you heard there will be 100 amendments in committee. There'll probably be more than that on the floor. We're doing this in regular order. And so we fully expect to get some support in this tax bill. Look, why wouldn't they support this? This is pro-growth, pro-worker, and it's been proven to work. Thank you. Yes, sir.
In terms of the repeal of the individual mandate, there have been discussions with the White House where the President is in favor of that. But I haven't noticed that there are no moderate Republicans here, the people who sank the repeal of Obamacare and the repeal of the skinny repeal. Are you concerned, Senator Rubin, as this question, that might jeopardize this tax bill and inclusion of the repeal of the individual mandate?
Well, look, there's going to be long and continued negotiations over the next couple of months. We've got a lot of work to do. We've got to achieve consensus. We haven't done that yet, but I believe we'll get there. One of the challenges of tax reform is if you're reducing rates, under the current approach in the House, they're paying for it by eliminating exemptions. That makes it in many ways more difficult to pass. One of the real virtues of repealing the individual mandate, number one, every Republican in the Senate has voted to repeal the individual mandate, 100% of us. But number two, $400 billion in revenue. If you're trying to make this work, makes it much easier to make it work, particularly if that money is directed to lowering individual rates. Listen, much of the pushback you're seeing to the House plan right now, the business side is terrific, but there are some taxpayers who are losing exemptions, particularly in some high-tax states, like New York or California, that could conceivably be paying higher taxes. I think that is a mistake. I think tax reform needs to cut taxes for everybody. And the beauty of repealing the individual mandate is, number one, you eliminate an IRS penalty that's falling on 6.5 million Americans who are predominantly middle and lower income. So it's immediate relief for those 6.5 million Americans, but it also allows you to lower rates for everyone so that people who are working hard, the result of a Republican majority in both houses needs to be that my tax bill for my family goes down so that I can save for my daughter's college tuition, so that I can save to take my family to Disney World. These are real challenges people are facing, and lowering people's tax bill, I think, is critical to making this happen.
And a quick follow-up to that. Kelly and Conway, I understand that the President spoke to Kevin Reid last night. Did he specifically mention that he wants to repeal the individual mandate?
Thank you for the question. We respect the fact that a process is ongoing, that it is the job of the legislature, both chambers, to go ahead and follow through with their work. The House has introduced its bill. The Senate will do the same, and there will be the process that occurs. The President has made very clear what his priorities are for both health care reform but also tax cuts and job security for the American people. I won't reveal any details of a private conversation, but I would go back to a previous question, if I may take a moment. The question as to whether tax cuts and tax overhaul will be bipartisan is really at this point a question for the Democrats, not the Republicans. And we want it to be bipartisan. We welcome their support. We don't know, frankly, how many of them are going to return home and tell the members of their districts or indeed their states that when they had an opportunity to give hardworking men and women across this country and aspiring and enduring entrepreneurs and job creators the tax relief that they deserve, that they expect, that they did not do so for petty partisan political reasons. And I would tell you, as a pollster of many decades, 28 years, that when you look at the polling, specifics really increases support. So if this is an argument about sound bites and clever wording, the other side will prevail. So what? Americans are smarter than that. They will look at the details. They will see that you're doubling the personal exemption, that you're increasing the number of Americans who will pay 0% in taxes, and you're increasing the number of Americans who will pay a larger percentage, 0% of a larger percentage of their income. You're giving not just child care tax credits, expanding them, which is a wonderful feature, but also adult dependents. And that, again, responds to the changing demography of our nation. You have many people in this country who are more and more responsible to help with the care of elder dependents. And so we would love to have Democratic support. And we know that people all across this country, regardless of whether they're represented by a Republican or a Democrat, are looking for much needed tax relief.
We have time for one more. In the back, young lady.
In your own conference here, it appears that there is a disagreement on the estate tax. Is this going to be ironed out any other way? Is the White House carrying for repealing the estate tax, and how is this being worked out right now?
Yes, the president is interested in repealing the estate tax, but having said that, this will be one of the issues that we're working with the House and Senate. The number one priority, as we've said, is making businesses competitive, and the other number one priority is a middle-income tax cut. Those are the two most important things. So we look forward to working with the House and the Senate, and I am super excited. This is all about growth. I think, as you know, the president fundamentally believes we need to get back to sustained GDP of 3% or higher. This is about creating trillions of dollars of additional revenue for the government and close to $10 trillion into the economy. So this is about growth, and we look forward to working with the House and Senate and getting this to the president and being at a signing ceremony this year. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me participate. Yes. Oh, yeah.
There are a number of, I'm Ted Barrett with CNN. There are a number of analyses out that show
people in Ohio would prioritize repealing the inheritance tax, or, as we both want, put more money in infrastructure. Would we repeal the medical deduction for people who have extraordinary expenses? I don't think so. Would we have bracket creep with chained CPI so people are going to be pulled up into higher brackets, unlike what happened with Ronald Reagan? No, I don't think that changes the test. That's why I think we should at least have this circuit breaker, and I'll give you 5 years for the circuit breaker. But this is an important principle.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Colley, you're recognized to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate listening to the discussion and debate this morning, and I have affection for Mr. Rainisi. I think he's a good, decent fellow. He finds himself in the unenviable position to have to defend a clunker of a bill, because that's what this bill is. It is a real clunker. The average person, you're right, Mr. Rainisi, the average person is not watching what we're doing here today in terms of debating the merits of this bill. That's because they are literally too busy making ends meet. They're making their lives meet. They're trusting, though, that we, but particularly you, the majority, who are presenting this bill without involvement from the minority, that you have their best interests at heart and that you have their back. But, and I'm going to quote a colleague, and I don't blanket all my colleagues on the other side with this notion, but you know who is watching? Your donors are watching. And Congressman Collins from New York is quoted today on the Hill as saying, quote, My donors are basically telling me, get it done or don't ever call me again. So we know who's watching. We know who you're all catering to today. And we also know that it's been rumored that if you don't get this done, well, you might as well give up the majority because you ain't coming back in the majority. And that's kind of sad that that's how we're going to be putting together a tax bill that affects so many people. Let's go back to the point about a clunker. Years ago, Americans would buy a car, and if it broke down within a short period of time, they were stuck with that lemon. They were stuck with that clunker. In response, states like mine in New York and others, they passed lemon laws. These lemon laws were made to ensure that the sellers stand behind their product. And if there was a defective car, that the seller was on the hook for that lemon. And that's what we're debating today, a legislative lemon law. Now, I think this is a lemon. I think it's a clunker, but you all disagree and differ. Every time the Republicans enact a tax cut that they proudly scream that it won't add a cent to the deficit, and we know in this particular case they can't scream that too loud because we know of at least $1.5 trillion that will be added to the deficit to give a tax break to the wealthiest in our nation. And every time they're proven wrong. In 2001, the Bush tax cuts were pushed as a way to save the economy. Well, I think when we look back at the Bush years, no one thinks that was a great economic time for our country and for families. But here we go again. They claim that this tax bill will lead to a $4,000 increase in wages for every worker in America. The president claims this bill will lead to a 6% growth in our economy. And they continue to claim this bill won't result in new deficits, though they are, again, allowing themselves a small cushion of $1.5 trillion, not including interest in new deficit spending. With the cost of interest on this $1.5 trillion tax cut alone, we're looking at over $2.2 trillion in new debt. We Democrats have been firm believers that you should not borrow to pay for tax cuts. So let's exercise a form of lemon law, a legislative lemon law. Will the Republicans stand behind their claims and if they're wrong, suspend their tax bill? Or will they continue to echo things that have no basis in reality and let the chips fall where they may? Instead of passing that old jalopy off to the next generation, it's time to take some responsibility. I hope my Republican colleagues accept the challenge, not for us, but for the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and children yet to be born. There's a saying that people like their friends, but they like themselves more. I know that we all love the generations yet to be born, but I think you kind of love the generations that's around more than you do them, and that's why we have this bill before us today. Mr. Blumenauer, would you like the remainder of my time?
Not quite yet.
Okay. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Mr. Higgins, you're recognized to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under this plan, millions of Americans will see an immediate $2,000 increase in their taxes beyond what the current law is. And 50% of middle America will pay more taxes in less than 10 years than the current law. Mr. Blumenauer has a very commonsensical stopgap against the accumulation of more debt and deficit. My question is, where are all the deficit hawks? In fact, where are any of the deficit hawks? Corporate tax cuts will reduce federal revenue over the next 10 years by $1.5 trillion. The Tax Policy Center, the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, and Goldman economists, from which both the Treasury Secretary and the head of the economic advisors came from, all have concluded, after clear analysis and comprehensive review, that no good economic growth will come from these tax cuts. In fact, the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School says that we will lose $1.75 trillion over the next 10 years and $5 trillion over the next 2 decades. The Treasury Secretary makes reference to dynamic scoring, which is nothing more than a repackaged version of supply-side economics and trickle-down that have been an abject failure relative to the promises that were made when they were advanced. Arthur Laffer drew a curve on a napkin. Everybody was bamboozled by him, and we ended up with record debt and deficits. The Treasury Secretary says that tax cuts will not only pay for themselves, that there'll be an additional $2 trillion because of the growth that will result from dynamic scoring. Newsflash for the Treasury Secretary. Tax cuts do not pay for themselves. In fact, tax cuts have never paid for themselves in human history. Best case scenario, that for every dollar that you give away in tax cuts, you can recoup in future economic growth about 30 cents. That puts you in a deficit situation. We should be concerned. Every serious independent economic analysis shows that this will blow a major hole in the annual budget deficit and will accrue to more debt for this nation for future generations. Mr. Blumenauer's amendment is very reasonable. It's fiscally responsible, and it recognizes our obligation to the next generation not to pass on this massive debt, to give tax cuts for very, very wealthy corporations that don't need it. Not only do corporations have over $2 trillion hidden away for tax avoidance in foreign accounts, they also have $1.9 trillion in Treasury bonds. We're told if they get a tax cut, that money will accrue to the benefit of the American worker by $4,000 to $9,000 a year. That is a lie. That is a lie. And anybody perpetrating that lie should resign or should be fired. Mr. Blumenauer's amendment is very reasonable, it's very responsible, and we should all support it. I yield back.
So I remind members, rules of decorum in this committee to make sure that we are not in any way impugning members' integrity or motives in any way. I know we will comply with that. Mr. Paulson, you're recognized to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, let me just thank my colleague from Oregon raising this issue on debt and deficits. One thing I will say is we have talked about tax policy in this committee for years, resulting in a 70,000-page code, which we're changing, obviously. This is more than just about tax cuts. It's about real reform that changes behavior for investors that are small businesses, that are large companies, that employ people all across this country, to making sure they're going to be seeing their paychecks grow. They're going to be getting wage increases. That hasn't happened. The first time in an economic recovery, we've actually seen wages fall during an economic recovery. We are trying to reverse that with real reform, not just tax cuts. And part of the problem we've had over years is Congress tends to enact tax policy that lasts for 2 years. It lasts for 1 year. It's retroactive. It goes for 6 months. So our small businesses, they cannot plan with certainty, with predictability, or with confidence on how they can invest in their company or in their employees. I've talked to many, Mr. Chairman, small businesses in my community who have said what they will do if they are given a guarantee of long-lasting rates, the most significant tax reductions for small business in decades. One employer said, I'm going to hire new people. I'm going to bring new people on board. Another employer was pretty straight with me, said, I'm going to give my employees a wage increase. We're going to give them a raise. Another employer said, I'm going to buy new equipment, new capital equipment, because of the expensing provisions, where I can invest with certainty and know that's going to be counted on for the next 5 years. A larger company that I spoke with said, we're going to take those resources, with now having a competitive tax rate versus our world competitors, And we're going to use those resources to invest in retraining our employees on how we can compete with other companies around the world. So, members, this is about planning for the future with confidence, with predictability, guaranteeing that our small employers, our large companies that compete on a global basis can have the confidence of knowing where the tax code is going to be in 10 years, not in 2 years, but in 10 years and beyond. Real reform, the most significant reform in 31 years. And finally, what we do know is this, is if we don't enact this and pass this legislation, we know in 2 years deficits are going up. The CBO says they are on a track back up. That's the facts. And so if we're going to suffer with 2% growth, if that's the new normal, and we're going to accept that, then young people getting out of college aren't going to be able to pay their student loans. They're not going to have more job opportunities. Older people who are retiring as baby boomers retire are going to be at risk without a competitive growing economy. So the tax code has not kept pace with the modern economy. This is our chance to move in a different direction, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Ms. Sanchez, you're recognized to speak on the amendment.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, what I find interesting in this discussion is this overly rosy belief that the tax cuts are going to pay for themselves through growth. And in fact, when we met the one time with the president, the first time that Dems were invited to that table, he said that he predicted we could get up to 6% growth easily. And I asked him at that time, well, what if we don't hit the 3% projected growth rate? And he didn't have an answer. And I suspect my friends on the other side of the aisle don't have an answer for what happens if that doesn't materialize. Well, I do have an answer. That means that we will go further and further into debt on the wish or the hope or the prayer that our economy will grow at 3% or more rate for a sustained period of time. A projection which, by the way, most economists think is not possible under this plan. There's nothing in this bill that guarantees that our economy will grow by at least 3% yearly. So we should at the very least, have a provision, such as Mr. Blumenauer's very well-reasoned amendment, that says, hey, if after 2 years this overly optimistic economic forecast doesn't in fact materialize, well then let's not keep throwing good money after bad. Let's not keep betting on a losing hand. Let's stop the money hemorrhage and let's cease the madness. And let's stop this really bad plan. So I believe that Mr. Blumenauer's amendment is a thoughtful amendment. It's a well-reasoned, it's a logical amendment, and yet my colleagues on the other side of the aisle seem to dismiss it out of hand. I think at the very least we should have a circuit breaker that says, if this isn't working, let's stop and reevaluate, and let's try again. So I fully support Mr. Blumenauer's amendment, and if he cares to, I will yield him the remainder of my time.
Thank you. I appreciate the gentlelady's courtesy. It is important to not have a false conflict. I think we could have worked together, as I mentioned, with reference to Mr. Kelly. If we were looking at how we were going to allocate this, it wouldn't be the bill that is in front of us. Who on this committee really wants to break the commitment that we made to the wind energy industry, a commitment I think was widely supported on a bipartisan basis and put at risk $50 billion because people took Congress at its word and the bipartisan strength, and this is the only retroactive position in this bill. Why would we put at risk?
All right, folks, we are going to start our News Now broadcast out with some breaking news out of Pennsylvania, where a state trooper has been shot during a traffic stop. We'll be back with more news and updates coming up in 5 minutes.
is a Fox 10 News Alert. This is a Fox 10 News Alert. This is a Fox 10 News Alert.
And we start you off with this news alert coming out of Pennsylvania, where we are learning that a trooper has been shot during a traffic stop there in Northampton County. You're taking a look at the scene of where this shooting happened. We do know that the suspect right now is in custody, but we don't know the condition of that trooper. Hi, everybody. Mike Page, Ron Hoon here as we deliver this breaking news to you. Every time we hear stories about this, about a trooper getting shot, it's always very sad situation.
Seems like it is, sadly, part of the growing level of violence in our country. Now, this is happening north of Philadelphia. In fact, it's happening in this area. The closest small town would be Nazareth, Pennsylvania. But if you're at all familiar with the eastern half of Pennsylvania, it's going to be south of Scranton, north of Philadelphia, actually fairly close to Allentown, the song made famous in a Billy Joel song. But today, they're making news for all the wrong reasons here. We did see some live pictures of the ambulance as it left the scene, and you don't want to read too much into it, but the ambulance was, in fact, I believe these are pictures, video pictures from a little while ago. You
Just
had a
moments ago there.
couple of highway patrol vehicles that were following it closely. And we presume they're headed as quickly as possible to the nearest hospital that would have triage-type capabilities. By the way, the governor tweeted that he is praying for this trooper and their family. We don't have any ID on the trooper yet. We don't know their condition. We don't even know if it's a man or a woman who the officer, we just don't have any details that we can pass along yet. Obviously, in a case like this, they are going to reach out to her family or to his family and try to get the news to them before any additional information is released. But for right now, it's a pretty scary sight, that's for sure.
Yeah, really scary, and just goes to show you once again that our officers around the country under attack, and that's a big reason why a lot of departments, including right here in Phoenix and the surrounding areas, are having hard trouble filling up their need for officers on the field.
Right. Well, it all seemed to really become an even greater problem, I guess, last year. We noticed a pretty dramatic increase, and then this year we've sort of seen that continued level of violence.
Yes.
It does seem to kind of mirror the growing level of violence that we feel is happening in the country. But whether it is or whether it's just that we have so many of these instances that are news-making headlines, talking about the mass shootings, those kinds of things, we'll have to wait to see. They'll come out with crime statistics and analyze this year, a year down the road. But it's a sad morning there in Pennsylvania, and we surely hope that that officer is going to be okay.
Yeah, we hope for the very best, and if we get any more news that comes down, we will update you, of course, right here on News Now. But yeah, again, Ron, we are hoping for the very best for that trooper. But that is not the only news happening today. Of course, there's always something going around, including in the world of politics, and President Trump in South Korea now.
Yeah. It's interesting because the level of the rhetoric coming out of the White House regarding North Korea, almost within the first month or so of Donald Trump taking the presidency, has been ratcheted up to a level that we haven't seen before. In fact, there's an interesting story out there today that the Democrats are working on a bill on Capitol Hill that would limit the president's military capabilities and prevent a preemptive strike against the North Koreans. There's a feeling, at least amongst some in Washington, that this situation could get very dicey very quickly. But when you listen to, and I know you're going to share some of this with our viewers today, Mike, again, this is the beauty of News Now. Something happens an hour ago or overnight. Like a lot of these stories are going to be happening in the middle of the night out of Korea, in the next 3 days out of China, and as he continues on, Vietnam and the Philippines as well. There'll be a lot of headlines. Mike's able to grab this stuff when you're normally not watching, and you wouldn't even know necessarily, let's see, so if I want to catch the president in China tomorrow at Tiananmen Square or at the Forbidden City or wherever he's going to be, that's obviously highly anticipated. How can you TiVo it? Because you don't know exactly when it's going to happen. Or, which one of these national outfits is even going to carry it at the time. So Mike here, especially when things are happening in Asia, in the very early morning hours here, is able to grab stuff, get it to you, and then we can share it. This news conference from the president today, pretty interesting. It's almost like he is able, this is all part of a life learned of negotiating techniques, I'm sure. He himself can play good cop and bad cop, right?
Yes.
Okay? Because today he sounds like good cop. Over the last few months, there have been times where, I think everybody felt like, wow, we may be headed toward military conflict. Today,
I don't think like it would be like so immediate the way
so
his
immediate,
was.
Right? I wrote this quote down, Mike, knowing that I was going to spend a little time with you here on Fox 10 Extra. He said, "I do see certain movement when it comes to dealing with the North Koreans. Beyond that, he wouldn't say. Keep in mind, there were some people upset in D.C. that he sent out a tweet a few weeks ago saying, Rex Tillerson, you're wasting your time, basically.
Yeah.
There's no more talking to be done. But now he's over there 35 miles away from the border, knowing that there is probably no message that he can deliver more loudly to the North Koreans than whatever he says today in Seoul. He's a little over a half-hour drive to the North Korean border. They're going to hang on every word. And today it's been conciliatory. It's him saying, I see movement. He said, talking about their capability and our capability, that we have weapons that I hope to God we never have to use. And he's urging the North Koreans to come to the negotiating table. So who knows?
Yeah, we'll see if President Trump is the deal-making president that we know that he is in the business side of the world.
Yes.
From The Apprentice and, then his big empire.
Again, this will be something when Mike rolls this, you'll be able to kind of listen and make your own judgment as to kind of what you always want to read between the lines a little bit. Well, what's the president really saying? What's he talking about? And this will be a good one for you to have for everybody.
Definitely. And so we will continue to monitor that, as well as we just want to bring you back. We do have new aerials coming out of Pennsylvania as well, with this breaking news of the trooper being shot there. Not sure what the scene right there is. What do you think?
Looks like you've got an officer down. You've literally on his knees doing some of the early investigative work. Looks like that most likely would be the vehicle in question that the officer had pulled over. Oh, no, wait a moment. Okay, so they're at the hospital.
Yes, that's the hospital area, but I'm just trying to make out what's going on right there. So.
Yeah, that is interesting because you got another officer on the ground.
And now what are they pulling? What are they pulling right here by the?
Yeah, let's watch
let's watch.
Let's see. Are they doing something to maybe cover up the
car here? Looks like they're putting some sort of wrap on it.
Yeah, it does. As a matter of fact, so it was only a few miles. I wonder if are we able to hear some of the audio that's coming in from our station that way?
Yeah, I don't think.
Check.
No, there's no audio associated with that. But we're going to definitely take a nap.
It's really interesting because with the way the crime scene tape is set up, it feels like this is more of crime scene investigative work. As opposed to, where an ambulance would pull in. It surely looks like they're in the process right there of taking pictures and doing other investigative techniques. So a bit of a mystery right now as to how this whole situation is unfolding. It looks very serious.
Yeah, very serious. So we'll keep an eye on that for you as well, right here on News Now. But we do want to go to those remarks by President Trump in South Korea.
Yeah. Keep in mind, it's a fairly short visit, and by this time tomorrow, I believe, we'll be talking about the events as they unfold in China. This really will be the highlight of the trip. You've got the leader there who has now risen to a higher level of power than any Chinese leader since Mao and Deng Xiaoping. This is President Xi. They appear to have a great relationship. Donald Trump, our president, needs to see more from the Chinese leadership in terms of cracking down on North Korea. And then what about jobs? Obviously, the Chinese want to see their people continue to succeed economically. But I was over there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, you were.
They are booming like you wouldn't believe. I mean, so our economy grows at 2% a year, 2, maybe 3%. Here's China growing at almost 7% a year. They are so booming. So how it all plays out over the next 24 to 48 hours is going to be really interesting. And really, frankly, it starts with this news conference today in South Korea.
Yeah, really do. All right. Thank you so much, Ron, for your input. And let's watch President Trump here.
Well, thank you very much. And this is an exciting time, and we're going to have an exciting day tomorrow for many reasons that people will find out. in addition to the fact I look forward to making a hopefully very comprehensive speech before you and the leaders of Korea, and that'll be really something that I'm representing the American people. The relationship that we have is a fantastic one. And I have to say, President Moon and First Lady Kim, thank you very much.
네, 대단히 감사합니다. 오늘 우리는 아주 훌륭한 하루를 보냈습니다. 그리고 또 내일 또 아주 훌륭한 하루를 보낼 것 같습니다. 그리고 내일 나는 여러분과 또 한국의 여러 지도자분 여러분 앞에서 매우 포괄적인 연설을 드릴 예정입니다. 나는 미국을 대표해서 한국에 왔습니다. 미국과 한국은 아주 훌륭한 관계를 가지고 있습니다. 먼저 그 문 대통령님과 또 여사님께 대단히 감사하다는 말씀드립니다.
I greatly appreciate your hosting Melania and myself on our first trip to the very beautiful Republic of Korea. We were honored to welcome you to the White House this past summer, and now it's a tremendous honor to visit your magnificent home, and magnificent it is, to see this beautiful land and to meet the remarkable people of South Korea.
나는 오늘 멜라니아 내 아내 멜라니아와 함께 한국을 첫 번째로 방문하였습니다. 그리고 지난 여름에 백악관에서 문 대통령님 내외를 환영하는 그런 기회를 가졌습니다. 오늘은 이제 문 대통령님의 조국인 한국을 방문하게 되었고 이 아름다운 나라에서 또 훌륭한 한국민을 만나게 된 것을 깊은 영광으로 생각합니다.
The partnership between our two nations and our two people is deep and enduring. We have been proud to stand by your side for many decades as an unwavering friend and a loyal ally, and you have never had a time where this ally has been more loyal or stood by your side more than right now.
우리는 한미 두 관계에 있어서 동맹과 우정을 더욱더 깊이 만들었고 또 우리의 우정은 더욱더 재확인하였습니다. 지난 수십 년간 한국과 미국은 흔들리지 않는 우정과 동맹을 가지고 있습니다. 그렇지만 그 어느 때보다도 우리 지금이 한미 동맹은 더욱더 깊고 더욱더 확고한 그런 시기입니다.
Here in South Korea, the people built a free, sovereign, and democratic republic. Through their resilience and sacrifice and determination, they became the chief architects of the future. Today, the course of this great nation is charted solely by the free people of South Korea.
한국민들은 아주 여러 가지 어려움을 겪었습니다. 하지만 그들은 탄력성과 희생과 또 결의로 미래를 만들어낸 것입니다. 오늘 한국민들은 아주 자유롭고 민주적인 그러한 나라를 만드는 것입니다.
Mr. President, your remarkable success truly demonstrates what is possible when people are free to follow their dreams, pursue their passions, and hope for a better future for their children. Tonight we celebrate South Korea's success and we affirm our close and abiding bonds of friendship.
한국을 봤을 때 사람이 자유와 민족을 강하게 한다면은 어떠한 결과를 날 수 있는지를 보여주고 있습니다. 열정과 미래를 통해서 한국은 성공을 보여주었습니다. 오늘 밤 우리는 서로의 우정과 결의를 더욱더 확고히 하고 있습니다.
Together our nations remind the world of the boundless potential of societies that choose freedom over tyranny and who set the free, and we will free. And we will sacrifice, and we will hope, and we will make things beautiful, especially the aspiration of your people.
오늘 우리는 폭정 대신에 자유를 선택한 사회는 무한한 잠재력을 가지고 있다는 것을 세계에 상기시켜주고 있습니다. 그리고 이러한 자유와 이러한 꿈을 가진 사람들은 아름다운 열망을 이룰 수 있다는 것을 보여주고 있습니다.
As true partners, we have remained faithful friends through periods of challenge and opportunity. And that's what we have now, is great opportunity. We will continue to support each other in the years ahead.
우리는 진정한 파트너로서 어려운 시기에 또 여러 가지 기회를 함께 해왔습니다. 그리고 지금 우리는 아주 훌륭한 기회를 가지고 있습니다. 우리는 계속 서로를 지지하고 서로를 위해서 함께 할 것입니다.
In that spirit, I would like to offer a toast to President Moon and First Lady Kim, and to the people of South Korea, may freedom and peace flourish on this peninsula. In our time, and for generations to come, this will be a special evening and a special time. May our bonds of friendship continue to deepen, and may the cherished hopes of our people and the people across the region soon be realized. Mr. President, may your dreams come true. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you very much.
오늘 나는 그 한국민들께 한반도의 자유와 평화가
You're taking a live look at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, the site of that horrific massacre on a Sunday. 26 people dead, 20 injured, and many people saying it could have been a lot worse if it wasn't for some good Samaritans coming to the aid of those parishioners. So what are some of the gun laws for good Samaritans? If they see a situation happen, what can they do? That's why I talked today with David Lear, Director of Training for Caswell's and C2 Tactical, to kind of describe some of those laws for Good Samaritans as well right here in Arizona.
Revised statutes, Title 13 is the criminal code. So if you want to find out what's legal, what's not, you can go straight to 13. Chapter 4 deals with justification of use of force. And so there's quite a bit of different stuff that we have here in Arizona, and the terminology is very loose. So you have to understand that the law is very black and white, and the reason why they make that language very loose is because they want to allow a little bit of color. Okay, because every circumstance is going to be unique and different given the climate and the day of the week, etc. So 404 is the use of self-defense. 405 has to do with deadly physical force, and then 406 has to deal with third-party defense. If we combine those, they basically state that a person is justified in threatening to use or using physical force or deadly physical force immediately necessary to stop or prevent grave, serious risk of bodily harm or death. Now, again, that's open to interpretation for what's reasonable. Okay, so a reasonable amount of force. So if you're pushing and shoving me, then I'm not justified in shooting you. I would just push and shove you away. But if I was a 6-year-old girl, and you're pushing and shoving me. Well, I'm at a much greater risk for grave bodily harm, injury at that point. So all that gets looked at whenever we're looking at justification. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, cool. And then where, for this particular situation, this would be justified, right? I mean, he saw a situation that was...
So that's a really interesting point. You would think that a reasonable person can see the situation going on and immediately identify that this shouldn't be taking place. Okay. So what did he see? When did he see it? How did he know? So if he actually saw this person shooting innocent people and trying to make a getaway as he's doing it, then yes, we could, of course, take whatever appropriate action is necessary. If all he saw was a man with a rifle running into a truck and escaping after hearing shots fired, well, now, how does he justify that it was necessary to stop him? That could have been somebody who was also who was escaping to go chase the bad guy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it has to do with what you knew and when you knew it. Okay, does that paint kind of a clear picture?
Yep.
Now, I said earlier, too, on the live deal there that here in Arizona, we have a very tight-knit city area, so we're always telling you, don't give chase, because this person's going to hop on a road, he's going to hop on a freeway, and he's going to be driving at high rates of speed, and if you're chasing him, you're probably only going to increase the chances of him causing more grave bodily harm, injury, or death, because if he causes an accident, blows through red lights, things like that. We want you to stay put. You are no longer at risk for death or grave bodily harm. He's already fled, and let the police do their job. So it has to be immediate, it has to be happening right now, and if at all possible, you want to avoid it altogether. So if I saw somebody carrying a rifle into a store and I saw an opportunity to get myself and my family out of there, I would do it.
Yeah, and I mean, that must be still so hard, too, if you do see a situation, you hear the gunshots, and then you see somebody running out. But that's a good point, though. You don't know. Maybe he's somebody that's chasing the bad guy as well.
Correct. It could be somebody searching for a bad guy who thought they ran into the store that you're in. So there's a lot that you have to figure out very quickly. Now, most people who carry CCW permits and their firearms, etc., you're not really traveling alone. A pistol is used for personal protection. Okay, so that means a tool of last resort. It's the bottom one in the toolbox. There's a whole lot of other things you should go through first. You should always avoid a fight if you can, call 911 and be a good witness, and you have to move through those stages depending on the gravity of the circumstances. But also know that when you choose to carry a firearm for self-defense, that if anything happens to you, you're no longer capable of protecting your wife and your kids that may be with you. So your first goal should be to secure them and make sure that they're safe before you ever do anything else.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And looking forward now, what do you think is going to come from this case here?
It's rural Texas. It would take law enforcement probably a really long time to get to that area in a timely manner. I think that what these guys did was justified based on the totality of the circumstances. When you look at it completely, you know that this person was heavily armed, leaving the scene, and is obviously a lunatic. He's gonna harm more people. That was his goal today. And so I think that Texas is going to stand behind these individuals, not just the citizens, but law enforcement as well. And that is so important. We have to stand behind our law enforcement and decisions that they make. We have to stand behind our citizens who are faced with that challenge and those split-second decisions whenever and wherever possible. And everyone's capable of getting it wrong. It only takes a split second to do the wrong thing. That's why
true.
Training and education and practice in real stressful situations is what helps improve your judgment making.
And David, what do you think about these situations that soon after a tragedy like this, they start talking about gun laws when really doesn't seem like anything could have been prevented on something like this?
Well, no.
You can't get into the mind of a crazy person.
So we don't know all the circumstances. But we know a lot of facts about the Las Vegas shooter. Here's somebody who clearly was mentally deranged, but he was a multimillionaire. So he had complete access, clean background. So there was nothing there that could prevent that. The South Carolina shooter actually had a felony, should not have gotten his firearm. He passed the federal background check because they dropped the ball. So the black and white laws that are already in the books, there's so many of them, not just federal laws, but state laws. And I travel around a lot, so I have to know the laws of the states that I'm traveling to before I go there to make sure that I'm carrying it properly, that it's loaded properly, that it's the right one.
Yes.
So it's really difficult not to break the law with a firearm. There's so many laws. So creating more laws hasn't stopped criminals. There's 5,000 homicides a year from firearm deaths, which is way less than automobiles or anything else. And if you look at the 5 major metropolitan cities with the strictest gun control laws, like Chicago, Detroit, and so on, they have the strictest gun laws, and they have the highest murder capita by firearm deaths. You know, the Chicago alone's got 500 going on every single year. So that's a huge majority. Whereas in Georgia, where you have really loose gun laws, they only had 1 homicide by firearm in 2016, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it goes to show you that when the bad guys want something, they'll get the gun anyway. I mean, it's not like...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Australia, where they've completely banned and outlawed firearms. They're building them in garages, making their own ammunition. So, I mean, there's nothing to stop bad guys from getting firearms, and that's really, really tragic. So what we really need to do is educate the public on how firearms work, how they're used. Even if you don't like guns, you want to know when's your opportunity to run, when's your opportunity to hide, when's your opportunity to fight. Because if I understand how firearms work, even if I don't want to have a gun or carry a gun, or I can't because of work, I want to know those things. I want to learn first aid, CPR. Look at all the lives that were saved because people took education in first aid, CPR at the Las Vegas shoot.
Yes.
You know, had those people not been there immediately to respond and take care of things, you know, the situation would be completely different. And then lastly, if you actually do consider carrying a firearm, you have to know the firearm's limitations and your limitations. And you're not going to know that unless you actually put yourself through training where we can psychologically push you. Okay? Because shooting paper is completely different from facing this same kind of decision-making process. You know, let us put you in the simulator, put you under that stressful conditions as close to it as possible, because nothing is as real as the real thing.
Yes.
But you want to see what kind of decision-making you're capable of making, and that's a great place to make mistakes and learn from them, because you get to go home, you know, without the repercussions, because you don't want to do it for the first time for real and make a mistake and live with the consequences the rest of your life.
That's very true. Well, David Laird, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this very complicated issue, but a very important one.
Oh, absolutely.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Revised statutes, Title 13 is the criminal code. So if you want to find out what's legal, what's not, you can go straight to 13. Chapter 4 deals with justification of use of force. And so there's quite a bit of different stuff that we...
And for the Texas Rangers, Corey Lane, L-A-N-I.
That's Corey Farrell. Say that again?
Corey Lane.
C-O-R-E.
Correct. Yes, sir.
L-A what?
L-A-I-N.
T-O-R-E-Y.
And from the District Attorney's Office, Audrey Lewis, L-O-U-I-S.
And did you give Corey's title?
Corey Lane from the Texas Rangers, Major for the Texas Rangers.
Is it C-O-R-Y?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. What's your first name of Lloyd?
Audrey Lewis. Lewis is the last name. L-O-U-I-S. Audrey.
Audrey Lewis, L-O-U-I-S. District Attorney.
District Attorney. This will be your 2-minute warning. We'll be with you shortly, okay?
Could you give us the ATM?
Fred Milanowski, M-I-L-A-N-O-W-S-K-I. Fred, F-R-E-D, Special Agent in Charge, ATF. Just as a reminder, the leadership for DPS will speak and address everybody. Please allow everyone to get their statements out. After that, if they entertain questions, raise your hand. They'll call on you and they'll answer questions, okay?
We're going to have several speakers today, and we ask that you hold your questions until the very first, there's 3 things that we're not going to discuss today. And number 1, we're not going to discuss the motive. We have released that the shooter was at odds with his in-laws. We have released that the mother-in-law...
This is a Fox 10 News Alert.
All right, we are getting a live update now on the Texas massacre. Right now, officials updating us on that deadly church shooting. Let's listen in live here.
Could affect future interviews. In addition to that, we have the suspect's cell phone. We have executed a search warrant on that cell phone, and that cell phone has been turned over to the FBI for analysis. FBI Special Agent in Charge Chris Combs is here, and here shortly he's going to discuss that. Another thing we're not going to discuss today is the names of the victims inside the church. We believe we have everyone properly identified, and we have notified all the next of kin. However, the medical examiner's office is confirming our findings, and they will give us permission to release those names, and we hope to have that later today or tomorrow at the latest. And the last thing that we're not prepared to discuss is the suspect and his release from the Air Force. We would refer all those questions back to the Air Force. With that, first up is going to be Special Agent in charge of ATF, Fred Malinowski, and he has an update on the firearms.
Thanks, sir. Good morning, everyone. Two updates from ATF. One is, as far as the rifle goes, the Ruger 5.56, ATF firearms expert examined that rifle yesterday. All indications are that that is not a fully automatic weapon. That is a semi-automatic weapon. We will not know 100% sure until we actually test fire it, but all indications now are that it's a semi-automatic weapon. I want to clear that up because that's been reported a couple different ways in the media. The second thing is ATF agents have acquired shell casings from the scene. Those shell casings will be entered into ATF's National Integrated Ballistic Identification Network, and that will help us determine if that rifle was used in any other shootings. Thank you very much. I'll answer any questions at the end. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Christopher Combs, the FBI SAC here in San Antonio. As the commander stated, the phone of the subject was turned over to us. We flew that on a DPS plane last night to Guadagno. They're in the process of looking at the phone. Unfortunately, at this point in time, we are unable to get into that phone. So it actually highlights an issue that you've all heard about before. With the advance of the technology and the phones and the encryptions, law enforcement, whether that's at the state, local, or the federal level, is increasingly not able to get into these phones. So I'm not going to describe what phone it is, because I don't want to tell every bad guy out there what phone to buy to harass our efforts on trying to find justice here. I can assure you that we're working very hard to get into the phone, and that will continue until we find an answer. I don't know how long that's going to be quite honest with you. It could be tomorrow, it could be a week, could be a month. We just don't know yet. But we're going to keep working on that phone and the other digital media that we have, and we can turn that over to the Rangers. Thank you.
Obviously, this is a massive crime scene, and we have the best of the best processing this crime scene. It's a long process, and like I said, we're only 48 hours into this. The Texas Rangers and the FBI evidence recovery team have worked day and night, and today the incident commander for the Texas Rangers, Corey Lane, is here to speak.
Good morning. Again, my name is Corey Lane. I'm Company F Commander in charge of this crime scene processing. Just want to go over a few things of resources that we have dedicated right now, mainly the workforce personnel that's processing this crime scene. We have 136 commissioned officers dedicated to the crime scene processing or support of that mission. 49 of those 136 are the best of the best Rangers that we have. They're part of our major crime scene investigative team. They don't get on that team by accident. They have to show two things, which is talent and drive to be a part of a crime scene and interest in crime scene investigation. The team leads of that investigative team have all graduated the National Forensic Academy in Tennessee, and that's on top of their 3-week basic crime scene investigation training that they receive, that every Ranger receives from the Department of Public Safety. These Rangers also continually attend
victims inside the church. We believe we have everyone properly identified, and we have notified all
crime scene investigation. Like the director said, we're 48 hours into this, and these men and women who are dedicated to processing such a complex and massive scene have worked tirelessly, and is nothing short of inspiring. So that's all I've got.
Aubrey Lewis is the district attorney for the 81st Judicial District. Even though the suspect is deceased in this case, she has been out here every day working with the community and working with our victim services from all agencies, including the Department of Public Safety. and she's here to give a brief.
Good morning. We've had an outpouring from around the world of people concerned with the burdens that these families have with funeral expenses. And I want to give you a little bit of peace of mind to understand that the Attorney General's office has victim specialists along with FBI Victim Services, DPS, and our office that are working with these families one-on-one. And we have the Attorney General's office here because they have Crime Victims Compensation Fund that they are in charge of. That fund releases money for the victims' families, including funeral expenses. Those funeral expenses, the amount of funding for each victim is $6,500. We believe that that's going to be sufficient funeral costs for the victims' families, so they will not be burdened with that financial portion of their loss, and they can concentrate on trying to grieve and process what else is going on in their world at this time. In addition to that, there has been a company that has come forward and agreed to donate the caskets to all of the victims. And we are grateful for that person and their service to our community and their heart and being willing to donate that. So those people who are concerned with that initial burden that these families have, as we all are, we have a Crime Victims Compensation Fund that is in place for that purpose and is being utilized and streamlined to ensure that the victims are not burdened with that initial funeral expense. So thank you very much.
With that, I have a few questions that were submitted by the media that we will answer, and then we'll open it up to question and answers. The first one was, why was a concealed handgun license denied for the suspect? That's protected information. All I can tell you is that he did not have a concealed handgun license. When will the investigation conclude, and when will the church reopen? As far as the church reopening, that's a question for somebody else. We hope to finish up the crime scene investigation and all the forensic analysis by tomorrow night, and then that will be turned back over to the local officials. Were any other persons involved? We have no reason to believe, or no information that anybody else was involved in this crime. There's some question about the pregnant female inside the church. Again, she's one of the victims inside the church, and we're not prepared to release any information regarding the victims inside the church until we get confirmation from the medical examiner's office. There was a question regarding domestic terrorism. By definition, we have no reason to believe that this crime was politically motivated or based on religious beliefs. We have no reason to believe that. There was questions regarding the suspect's mother-in-law. She was not in the church. She does attend this church, but we know on Sunday when this crime occurred, she was not in church. Beyond that, there were some questions regarding the weapons purchase. I believe those were answered. Some questions regarding search warrants. We are executing search warrants, such as the evidentiary search warrant on the cell phone. But with that, that's all I have, and I'll open it up to y'all for questions.
I know you have to be very careful, and you did tell us you cannot answer certain questions. I'd like to ask you a general question that you absolutely be able to answer. In the issue of the moment, I'm not asking you any specifics. Do investigators, however, believe they have a handle? Do they believe they know what the motive is without telling us what it is?
There's still a lot of interviews to be done. We have some indication on what the conflict was between the family. You know, what the timing and stuff like that. Still a lot of work to be done. As I said, it's only 48 hours into this.
How could someone be denied the right to conceal carry a weapon and still be able to purchase weapons?
That's we have databases that we check. TCIC, NCIC.
I understand that it's law, but can you explain to me the rationale between being able to?
I can't. I can tell you. I can tell you what is required. And there was nothing in our databases that precluded him from purchasing a firearm.
So what is the question about the incident itself? What time, if you reconstruct it, what time did the first shot happen? How long did the incident last? How many shots was fired?
I don't have that at this time. I can tell you when the first call came in, the Wilson County Sheriff's Office arrived within four minutes. I can tell you 4 minutes is a long time during an active shooter situation.
What time was that releasing those 911 tapes?
That'll be up to the sheriff's office and their 911 system.
What is the status of the ex-wife and child?
I'm sorry?
What is the status of his ex-wife, Kelly's ex-wife, and his stepchild?
I don't have that information.
Are they okay?
Yes.
Sir, the president has said that hundreds of more people would have been at risk had the citizen shooter not been there. First of all, is that your assessment, that there would have been hundreds of more that could have been killed? And secondly, that more extreme vetting would have prevented the citizen shooter from getting elected?
I don't know about the vetting, but we can only speculate. We don't know what he was thinking, what was in his mind, and what his future plans were. But, you know, this is a situation where I wouldn't be willing to take that risk. And, you know, in my opinion, I said the other day that Mr. Williford, I believe he's a hero. I've seen no media since this started, but somebody sent me a clip of an interview that he did with the media, and how can you not love that guy? You know, that guy did what he knew needed to be done. And but as far as his future plans and what he had planned for the rest of the day, and if there would have been more deaths, you know, it's all speculation.
Would better vetting not have prevented the gunman from getting his weapon?
I don't know.
We heard the shooter was here last Tuesday for the fall festival here. Did he have any confrontations with any of the people here?
I don't have that information. Sorry.
Was there a gun? Confirm how many people were in the church at the time and whether everyone was injured or killed?
I'm sorry?
Was the entire congregation either injured or killed during the shooting?
You know, we believe the congregation at this church is roughly just over 50. You know, we know how many were deceased and how many were shot. There were very few that were here that were uninjured.
Did the shooter use a bump stock?
I don't have that information.
Is it possible he used it?
I would refer that to ATF.
Did the gunman, sir? A couple things. Did he use a bump stock? Two things. 15 clips, 30 rounds in a clip. Is it possible that he shot 450 rounds at the left? So did he use a bump stock?
First part of that is the number of rounds. As part of the investigation, we will not release that. There's no evidence of a bump stock being used.
So is it possible he fired 450 rounds?
Again, part of the investigation that is not going to get released publicly.
Last night, someone said all the magazines were empty by the end of it.
There's 15 times 30 is 450 shots. Were they all empty? I'm assuming that they were all full.
What was talked about yesterday is that the magazines at the scene were empty. So I don't believe there was a number put out.
That doesn't imply that all 450 rounds were fired.
We're just not going to put that information out as part of the investigation.
Do you have any information?
He supports that he was shooting from a rooftop position initially. Can somebody comment on that?
Meditation. When did he begin to plan this? And do you have anything specific to say?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah. About premeditation. Do you have any specific, or do you have any evidence when he began to plan his
attack?
We do not at this time. And to answer your question, we have no information that he was shooting from a rooftop. We don't have any facts to support that. We're the fact finders, and we're collecting the facts as we find them.
Can you speak a little bit about what the shooting position he had was?
He changed position. He walked, he moved. And as far as the magazines, you know, they're 30-round capacity magazines. How many rounds he actually had in those magazines? A lot of that trajectory work is being done this morning, so we can't answer that.
Writing text messages sent to the mother-in-law. Do we know when those were sent? Was it this weekend? Was it a week ago? What does that timeline look like?
Again, we will know more when we're able to exploit his phone.
Was he threatening anybody else in this? Are you executing a search warrant on his home, his vehicle, and what else?
I can't. A lot of the vehicle's already been processed and secured. As far as his home, I believe those have already been conducted. Whether they were consensual searches or search warrants, I can't answer to that.
When it comes to the phone, to him, or did based on the vehicle?
Made a targeted threat towards this church or gun violence threats towards the mother-in-law?
Again, that gets into the investigation, and we know that there was conflict. He was upset with the mother-in-law, but beyond that, I can't comment.
Did the shooter pick up the phone? Are you asking for tech companies to help you open it?
I know that you investigate, people give tips or anything like that. Was he ever at any time on the radar for the FBI?
So I can tell you that he is not in any FBI database. We have not had any investigations on him previous to this event.
As far as the telephone, I know in San Bernardino, you ended up having a super sleuth agent in unlocking that phone. Are you soliciting
So I can tell you at this time we're still working on it. We have partners that we work with on these things. I think it goes to complexity and how hard the problem is and how long it's going to take. But we will get into that phone.
Sir, everyone knows that an iPhone is one of the phones that is multiplied in this regard. Is it an iPhone?
I will not describe the type of phone because, again, I don't want to encourage bad people to buy it. I'm not going to talk about what kind of phone it is.
You and I talked about salt targets and your concern about salt targets. The sheriff of Williamson County is making a seminar available for churches to talk about security. Are we at that point?
So I've done a lot on active shooters through the years. You know, you look at the numbers are on the rise. I think everybody, no matter where you are, needs to think about this. If you're in a school, if you're in a college, if you go to the movies, we should all be thinking about what are we going to do if a crisis breaks out right here. There are a lot of programs out there. The FBI supports programs. We teach law enforcement. There's private community programs out there. But I think we all have to think very hard about this and make sure that we're prepared. Just like schools do fire drills, because we used to kill a lot of children in fires back in the early 1900s. I think we all have to take active shooters very seriously and do everything we can to prepare and prevent for that.
This is a local question for the DA.
And we are back out live here with the Texas Massacre Update. Officials there giving us an update on that horrific tragedy on Sunday.
Does that mean, if it means that they'll cover the cost, what does that mean for the $6,500 per victim promised by your crime victims compensation fund? Would that be added on to something like that?
We're working in partnership with all of the local funeral homes to ensure that our victims are not out of pocket and are not burdened by the cost of the funerals.
So it goes above $6,500.
That is our hope, is that the funeral homes will work with the victims to make sure that it does not go above that cost. I can't promise that to them at this point, but we are working in partnership with the funeral homes. They're aware of the situation, and they don't want to re-victimize our victims as well. So,
is there any funding available for the victims, for the ones that survived but got shot in the process? Any funding available?
That same crime victims compensation is also available for the victims who are suffering injuries that have medical expenses and things like that. And so they will work with the Attorney General's office, our office, FBI, DPS to ensure that they go through the process to have that compensated as well.
Any idea when the funeral count the unborn child?
I'm sorry?
Does the deceased count include the unborn child, or is it?
It does.
Any idea when the funerals will begin?
Include any unborn children?
Yes.
Any idea when the funerals will begin?
When the funerals will begin, that I do not know.
Director, are you able to answer that question? How many unborn children?
Just one.
In the 26?
Yes.
So of the 26, one is an unborn child? Yes.
Agent Combs, the Air Force has said it didn't forward the information from the shooter. Has this happened before? Is this a problem from the military, Air Force, or have you had this issue come up from other agencies not providing the critical information you guys need?
Unfortunately, this has happened in the past from a number of agencies. Nothing is perfect. I would refer you to a press release that our headquarters put out from our CGIS division that handles the NICS checks, and it gives you some particular percentages and how the problem is being addressed.
It was said last night that this was bigger than the domestic dispute, that if you had an issue with his mother-in-law that he wouldn't have come here and killed so many people. Is there any indication that it's tied to his beliefs in atheism, his anti-God rants that were posted online?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do we have a timeline as far as when did he start shooting? I mean, did he start shooting from the outside of the chapel, or did you start when he walked into the chapel? Do you guys have established that yet?
Don't have an exact time. He arrived. He was seen at the Valero. We know he went to the church. He exited. He fired into the front of the church. He moved to the side of the church, continued to fire. Then he entered the church and continued to fire. But as far as the exact time, I think, you know, with the 911 calls, we can tell you the first call that came in, and with our Good Samaritan, of course, you know, he was there. We know when the call came in, within 4 minutes, the Wilson County Sheriff's Office arrived on scene. But as far as the exact time of the first shot, I can't answer.
When was the call?
I believe so, yes.
One last question.
How many victims still in critical condition?
We have 10 that remain in critical condition.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out this afternoon. We will keep you updated through the DPS Twitter as well as through our email, please. Thank you.
All right, and that was the very latest there with that Texas massacre update. We did learn that the guns being used were semi-automatic. They were not automatic there, so that was a little bit of information that we received, as well as learning that there are groups now putting money together so that they could help to cover the victims' funeral expenses there. Obviously, though, just a horrible, horrible tragedy there in Texas, and it will take years, if not a lifetime, that family members and friends will be thinking about that situation there in Texas. It's just very hard for those fans, especially since it's such a tight-knit community as well, such a small community. Everyone seems to know each other there, and when you hear a statistic like 4% of that population there in that town have been wiped out, I mean, it's a lot of people, that's a lot of memories, and that's a lot of hopes that are gone. So we're wishing for the very best for those people there in Texas as they are dealing with a situation that is unfathomable at this time. All right, we are going to continue on here on News Now. Another big story happening is all about the tax cuts happening right now on the GOP side. But before the GOP press conference began, some of the key members discussed the Texas tragedy. Let's listen into a little bit of that right now.
That each one of us will be a part of the healing that needs to take place in this country. And part of giving people hope is the hope that comes from an opportunity for a better life. And that's what each of us as representatives seek to do each day in Congress. For us, as Republicans, we're very excited about tax relief and what that means for everyone and giving them hope for an opportunity for a better life. This is must-pass legislation that is going to fundamentally help everyone in this country, the little guy who feels like they're being left behind, families who are seeking the opportunity to get ahead. An extra $1,182 for middle-income families could mean the difference between living paycheck to paycheck and having the financial security and peace of mind. And that's why we're pleased to have Texas Representative Jody Arrington with us today to share a little bit more about his perspective. I've also had the chance to travel a little bit over the last couple of weeks holding tax reform forums. And yesterday morning I was in Pennsylvania and reminded once again as to the hope that people have because of the potential of tax relief. A school teacher, Chris, he's a father of 5, who was there to say, you know what, I'm really excited about what this means for my family. Tom, who owns a local wire shop, and other small business owners talking about wanting to give their employees a higher wage, but because of the tax burden, the health care burden, it's so hard to do that. And just a couple of weeks ago, I heard from Kenya, a black entrepreneur who said, I quote, "I have big dreams and I choose America to be the place where I live, where I raise my family, and where these dreams would become a reality. But we need help to give back to America what America has given us." These are the faces of tax reform. These are the stories that we want, that we're telling. And I was reminded yesterday that the shortest distance between two people is their story. Also, we're working on important legislation this week to help our veterans, over a dozen bills. Saturday is Veterans Day, but really every day should be Veterans Day. And I'm reminded that both being married to Brian, who's a retiree from the Navy, but also proud to represent Fairchild Air Force Base, and really humbled to stand by those who have served our country. We are the home of the free because of the brave, and we thank them every day for their service.
Good morning. My name is Jody Arrington. I represent District 19 in Texas. Thank you, Madam Chair, and leadership for this opportunity to share my thoughts and my heart. First, I want my fellow Texans in Sutherland Springs to know that our hearts are heavy for them, and that we're grieving with them, and that we're praying for their community. We're praying for First Baptist Church, and we're praying for all the families that were involved in this tragedy. I grew up in a small faith-based community in Texas, and I can tell you this,
Evil will not have the last word in Sutherland Springs. And darkness will not overcome their light. Now, as we lead up to Veterans Day, the best way we can honor our veterans is to deliver on our promises to these great heroes, and that's exactly what we've done in the House. We've passed 28 veterans-related bills out of the chamber. 8 bills have become law. We have improved access to health care by giving our veterans more choice in their health care decisions. We have enhanced educational opportunities through the new GI Bill, and we've increased accountability, transparency, and efficiency so the VA will not serve themselves but the customer, which is our veterans. I'm excited to be a part of this historic opportunity on tax reform. And tax reform in West Texas and in rural America is about giving our working class and middle class families a break and allowing them to keep more of their hard-earned money. It's about getting off the backs of our job creators, which are our small businesses, and let them create more and better jobs for their communities. It's about giving our farmers, our family farmers and ranchers, a reason to invest in new tractors and combines and cotton strippers so they can do what they've been doing since the beginning of this great country, and that's feeding and clothing the American people, and be more productive at that. And then at the end of the day, when they pass that family farm down to the next generation, we don't want their kids to have to sell the family farm or ranch just to pay the taxes. It's great to be with you guys, and God bless America.
And welcome back here to News Now, taking a live look at downtown of Phoenix right here on this Tuesday, November 7th, 2017. Right now, I'm joined by our very own Marcy Jones, talking about a story, though, a very sad story of some Valley lives taken way too soon.
Way too soon. This is, I think it hits home for a lot of people because, you know, being in such a big city, we see a lot of terrible car accidents.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we do have a problem with, you know, drinking and driving, and our law enforcement is so great with cracking down on it. We actually have some of the toughest laws, as you know, in the nation. But there were so many factors at play with this case that's going on right now, and we can kind of get into a little bit of it. But October 22nd, we have this beautiful couple. We have Lindsay Earle, Terry Dempsey. They're planning their wedding. Okay,
yeah.
They're a few months away from the big day. Just we talked to Lindsay's family, and she has accomplished so much in her 29 years on Earth. She was Miss Teen Arizona. She was a fabulous singer, lit up a room, and her fiance was just the same way. Unfortunately, someone made a really, really life-changing bad decision, and, you know, their lives were taken too soon. The arraignment happened this morning for that young woman that we just saw a little bit ago, Lauren Tamborelli. She had her 3-year-old in the car, and police are saying that she was driving under the influence. So it's, you know, talking to her family and having them be in the same room with the person accused of taking away the lives of their loved ones was just, it's unbelievable to think what they're going through.
Yes, and what was it like? I can't even imagine what it is for those family members, but what was the sense that you got when you were talking to those family members today right outside of the courthouse?
They, above everything, they just wish that Lindsay and Terry were here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
And that's the one thing that no one can give them. So they're hoping now for justice. They're hoping that this will serve as a lesson for people not to get behind the wheel compromised. And they said, you know, we're not only thinking about our family and how much we've lost, but also, you know, that the person, Lauren, who is on trial right now, she has that 3-year-old daughter. So,
yes.
You know, there's a big possibility that they won't be able to see each other kind of grow up. So it's a lot of sadness and a lot of confusion and I think anger. You know, Lindsay's mom was telling me that she gets very upset, and it's hard to kind of keep that in, especially when you're sitting across from the person that's kind of under fire for this. So it's a really tough one. You know, there's no rhyme or reason why it should have been them.
No, and when you're talking about a sudden death too, there's nothing that you can do that would brace you for that call or that message that you're about to receive, and it's just life-shattering.
And I think that's part of their healing process right now. They're saying, you know, Lindsay and Terry are in a better place. They didn't know, you know, what happened to them. There was no suffering on their part, but they're just leaving behind such a big hole in our hearts because, you know, no one can ever fill that. So it's really tough to watch a family go through this, and you know, they're just hoping. Lindsay's aunt was telling me that she wants to get involved with MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, because that's a really important cause to her. And, you know, they just try to kind of pick up the pieces every day and move forward for Lindsay and Terry.
Definitely. Well, it's, and then you spoke to the parents.
I did, yes. We saw the parents right after. So if you want to see, this was kind of just their reaction of everything. It's really tough.
All right, let's listen to a little bit of that.
Tracy Earl. Donald and Tracy Earl.
What would you like everybody to know about Lindsay and Terry?
I just want everybody to know that Lindsay and Terry were amazing people. They had such a future ahead. Lindsay has already impacted the world. She already has in her 29 years, and she had so much more to give. So much more. And Terry as well. They were just great human beings.
There's absolutely no reason why this had to happen, especially to your daughter and her fiance. I can't imagine what you guys are going through right now. To be in a room with the person that was responsible for it, I'm sure it's indescribable.
It was hard. It was very hard. I don't know if there's any way to get through to a person like that, what she did. I don't know if she even realizes what she did from one terrible decision. How many families it impacted and how many lives it impacted. It's just terrible.
I'm sure that wasn't the first time she's done that. I'm sure she probably drove that way a lot of times. With her child in the car. It makes it even worse.
All right, there. So a very tough interview there, and just sad all the way around.
So you can tell they just miss their kid.
Yeah.
They miss their kid, and they miss their would-have-been son-in-law. It's just really tough. And Lauren Tamborelli is actually facing a lot of charges. She's facing 9 counts of endangerment, 2 counts of second-degree murder. one count of DUI. You know, so she's facing a lot, and the families just want justice.
Boy, you know, after seeing a story like this, you think you have it hard, and sometimes in
it
life,
puts
and then
things into perspective.
Boy, this just
really
puts things into perspective. I mean, you think you might be having a bad day, you take a look at this family, what they're dealing with. It's just unbelievable.
I know. This is one that just doesn't make sense.
No, not at all.
It shouldn't have happened.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Well, and you're going to be working on a story for the evening shows, correct?
Yes, at 5, we're going to go into a little bit more detail of what happened and the hopes that the family has for the future.
All right, Marcy Jones, thanks so much for
Mike.
giving us an update on this story, and we'll be right back here on News Now. All right, everybody, welcome to News Now on fox10phoenix.com. We'll be right back.
To educate workers for the jobs of the 21st century, while they're taking that opportunity away.
And welcome back here to News Now, taking a live look at downtown Phoenix. Welcome here to News Now. Hi, everybody. Mike Pacey as we continue on with News Now. Remember, we take feeds from all over the country. And remember, when breaking news does occur, we have you covered right here on News Now. We're going to take you to another live event happening right now in Washington. This is where House Democrats right now are talking about that GOP tax cut bill. And right now they are continuing to slam that bill. Let's listen into a little bit. Right now we have Nancy Pelosi speaking live in Washington.
Overseas. American people deserve real bipartisan tax reform. This is about cuts to taxes for the wealthy and corporate America and cuts in opportunity for the American people. Instead, we should be sitting down, doing this in a bipartisan, thoughtful way, in a way that create growth, which creates good-paying jobs as it reduces the deficit. We call that a better deal. A better deal for better jobs, better wages, and a better future. And now it's my honor to yield the floor to a very special guest from George Washington University, a medical student, Max Rubin. Welcome, Max. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Leader Pelosi. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Max Rubin. I'm a second-year medical student at the George Washington University School of Medicine, and also part of the leadership committee for our local American Medical Student Association. I was born and grew up in rural New Mexico, went to New Mexico State University. I was fortunate because I received the state scholarship that allowed me to graduate from New Mexico State debt-free. And this was significant. Both my parents, They were public school teachers in the small town I grew up in, and so they couldn't afford to send me to college. And so after graduating, I served a year in AmeriCorps Community Health Corps in San Francisco. And again, I was very fortunate to receive some financial aid through the AmeriCorps Education Award, which contributed a little bit to paying for my medical school tuition. The reality, though, despite all of my good fortune, is that I'm going to be in approximately $300,000 worth of debt by the end of my medical school tenure. In addition, I plan to go into primary care, which means that it's going to take me a lot longer to pay off my student loans compared to my specialty colleagues. And so I'm here today to ask that Congress not eliminate the tax deduction for interest payments on student loans. I intend to take advantage of this program when I'm a medical resident, working 80 hours a week, making $50,000 a year, and facing a huge pile of debt. More importantly, though, our country is facing a massive shortage of primary care providers, and eliminating this tax deduction would only contribute to the already struggling efforts to provide incentives for primary care. And the shortage, as we all know, it hurts our patients and it overall hampers our healthcare system. And so for me and my medical students, please keep the tax deduction for student loan interest payments. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Representative Swalwell.
Thank you, Max, and thank you, Leader Pelosi and my colleagues. When it comes to young people in America, this tax scam is really about, are we investing in you or are we divesting in you? And this tax plan is the further divesting of young people in America. We've seen it in their budget to eliminate the public interest loan forgiveness program. We see it now in what they're seeking to do with the student loan interest deduction. I chair a group called Future Forum. It's 27 of our youngest House Democrats. And to the young people across the country, we hear you, we are you, and we're for you. We hear you because over the last 2.5 years, we've gone across America, 50 cities, from Omaha to Illinois to Nevada to Fort Worth, Texas. We've spoken to thousands of young people where they gather, at community colleges, at startup workspaces, brew pubs, and coffee houses. And what we've heard from them are they are an inventive, aspirational generation with a lot of anxiety about the future. The future is hard enough for them with automation fears and seeing jobs go overseas and their parents themselves struggling to get by. The future's hard enough without this assault on one of the few ways that they're able to get by. So we hear them. We are them. Our members are as diverse as this generation. We have Latinos, African Americans, members of the LGBTQ community, men and women who were veterans and small business owners. And we ourselves have a lot of student loan debt. I have just under $100,000 today. I rent in the community where I grew up, hoping that I can come out of the student loan debt and one day eventually buy with my wife and our son. We are this generation, and we're for this generation. We're for it in what we have proposed to expand, actually, the student loan interest deduction from $2,500 as it is today to $5,000 and to lift the income cap, but also what we will fight for. We're going to do everything we can to oppose this tax scam that the GOP is putting forward. Because we know it's not only young people who it hurts. What we've heard as we've gone across the country is that when it comes to young people and their future, their issues are a family matter. So often today, young people, because it's so expensive to rent near where they work or to pay off their student debt, they're moving back home with mom and dad. And as baby boomers age and their own parents live longer, they're finding that their own parents are moving in with them too. You're seeing multiple generations living in the same household. So if you take this deduction that 12 million young people took in 2015. That's hundreds of dollars in their pocket away. You don't just hurt them. Chances are you're hurting their parents. So we're going to fight it. And we need young people to join us. And so that's what we're asking for today. And we're seeking to continue to enlist them wherever we go. And finally, I just want to say, our members are going to continue to engage on this issue. And later this week, we're rolling out our higher education plan because we think it's not just opposing these tax scams, but there's a lot of ideas out there that we can put forward to invest in young people. I'm excited that today we're joined by Sue Ann Pickett, who is here, and she is from Ohio, and she works in nonprofits. And she also, I hope, can talk a little bit about the incentives to go into nonprofits that the Trump administration has proposed to take away. So it's Ray Ann Pickett from Ohio, local nonprofit worker. Thank you, Ray. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Representative Swalwell. My name is Ray Ann Pickett. I'm 33 years old, a mom to two rambunctious boys who are 2 and 4 years old, a stepmom, a wife, and a worker. 14 years ago, I borrowed private and federal loans to help me pay for college. I graduated with my bachelor's degree and $75,000 in student loan debt. I began repaying my loans when my 6-month grace period ended. I had a low-paying job, so I waited tables at night. I didn't have enough money for loans and rent, so I slept on my friends' couches. I paid as much as I could, as often as possible. Like many, my payments were over $1,000 a month, with a large portion of the payments going towards interest only. During those years when I was establishing my career, the student loan interest rate deduction meant that I had a light at the end of a dark tunnel of repayment and from the astronomical unfixed interest rates on my private loans. Over the last 10 years, I have repaid over $96,000, much of that going towards interest. Towards the end of 2016, I lost my job, and my husband and I made the difficult decision to stop repayment on my student loans until I found one, which I have today. Today, my loans are in default, but I expect to be back on course in the next few months. I have come to terms with the fact that these student loans will always be with me, and they might never be paid off. The deduction I received for many years was critical to my survival, and will be again. $33 a month may not amount to a big deal to lawmakers who make enough money to survive, but for my family, it is the difference between turning the heat on in November or waiting another month, between buying vegetables and fresh fruit for my kids to eat or not, and between affording childcare or not, between having the American dream or not. I urge my elected officials to not only keep the student loan interest rate deduction, but to improve and double it, not just for me, my children, and my family, but for the millions of people just like us. And now I'd like to turn it over to Representative Price. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you, Ray Ann. Thanks to all who are here and for your interest in what we're doing, which is trying to blow the whistle on this scam of a tax plan, raising taxes on millions of middle-class families, slashing taxes for the wealthiest people in the country and for large corporations, and then having the gall, as President Trump says, I guess with a straight face, this is a tax plan for the middle class. Give me a break. What we're talking about here today is Exhibit A of why this is a tax plan that targets the middle class, targets the breaks that ordinary families have counted on to make it in this country, and certainly to make it in the demanding world of seeking and paying for higher education and professional training. Now, I did author this provision back in 1997, and relax, I will not give any war stories about how that happened. It was interesting. It's quite an effort. It was during a period when we were doing a general budget, one of these big budget deals and an overall tax plan. And it came by me, I think, as a North Carolinian and as coming from a family steeped in education. My parents are both teachers. I taught at the college level myself. I'm a parent of college students who have who incurred loan obligations. And there were many collaborators. You can read about it in my book. I wrote it up. Collaborators, Bob Etheridge, a former superintendent of public instruction, Martin Lancaster, a dear friend. There were a group of us who got together and said, let's do something in this tax plan for education. Ordinary folks need a break here. And a lot's happened since then. The average loan obligations of students coming out of college has increased. We, in the Obama administration, addressed this in some serious ways. We got rid of the middleman that was skimming off so much of the student loan money. We have provided more generous, more sensible, I think, repayment terms, especially for people going into public service jobs. We've improved the grant to loan ratio, increasing the Pell Grants. All this is a work in progress, and more needs to be done. More needs to be done because these debt loads are very severe, as you're hearing here today.
This is a Fox 10 News Alert.
All right, folks, we start you with this news alert here happening right now in Pasco County, Florida. You can see here a small plane has gone down in the Gulf of Mexico. Right now, the circumstances behind this incident not known at this time, but obviously some breaking news happening at this hour in Florida. Deputies say the aircraft went down around noon local time there in the Gulf, north of Bailey's Bluff in Holiday. This is obviously a developing story. We don't know the situation with the pilot right now, or if there was any passengers associated with this plane. Continue to stay with us right here on News Now. I'll be looking to see if I could get any more details for you. Just like I said, though, we take feeds from all over the country. And remember, when breaking news does occur just like this, we bring it right to you right here on News Now. You can see here Pasco County, Florida right now as officials investigating the small plane that went down in the Gulf of Mexico today. We don't see, from this vantage point, everyone, we don't see any rescue boats around the area at this time here. So let's see if they could widen out just a little for us. I'm working to get you guys the very latest details. Obviously, it's a very fluid situation at this time. The Pasco Sheriff's Office Marine Unit is responding to the scene, which is just north of Bailey's Bluff. So, okay, now that they have widened out, we do see those boats on hand right now. So let's see if they are going to be making any strides here right now. You can see that they're several yards away from the plane right now, but obviously a very sad situation for that pilot and any passengers that are associated with this plane here. This is a breaking news situation right here on News Now for you. And we'll be back with more news and updates, and I'm going to see if we could get any more updates for you on this developing situation.
is a Fox 10 News Alert.
And welcome back here to News Now, taking a live look in Florida, just off Pasco County, where you can see rescuers right here as a plane has went down in the Gulf of Mexico. We're going to see if we could get that shot back for you right now, but you could see right now the rescuers are getting ready to make way to that plane. So this is very breaking as we're talking right now. They're getting a little bit closer to that aircraft. Very sad situation here. We don't know the condition of the pilot or if they had any passengers there, but you see the three boats right there making their way to the aircraft, and there are other boats in the vicinity as well. Obviously a very fluid situation, and viewer discretion is advised during this time. That's why I think the chopper is widening out just a little bit more now to give the respect here that this deserves, because you don't know the situation with the pilot or the victim. We will continue to monitor this here for you, but this has happened about 12 o'clock their local time. So, and right now it's about 90 minutes from now. So it happened about 90 minutes ago, this plane crash. That's what officials are saying at this moment. And rescuers are there at the scene. I'm continuing to look right now on Twitter if I could get any updates for you for locally what the media is saying there. But the very latest was just that plane crash near Holiday, Florida. The Pasco County Sheriff right now is on the scene. Still no confirmation of the pilot there, but you can see they are getting a little bit closer to that aircraft. But Sky Fox obviously widening out. You don't know what they might uncover there. So it looks like our shot is freezing up there. And if I get any more details, of course, I will pass that along to you right here on News Now. Of course, when breaking news does occur, you know we have you covered right here. And we'll continue on here with News Now. We just moments ago heard from the Democrats on their stance with the GOP tax cut bill. And now some Republicans, including the Treasury Secretary, speaking on this tax cut bill. You're going to hear from him, and even Kellyanne Conway as well. Let's listen into a little bit of that.
I appreciate the opportunity to have worked with members of the Senate and the House since the beginning of the year on this. We couldn't be more excited about where we are. This is about making America competitive again. We have one of the highest tax rates in the world. We tax on worldwide income. This is about making our American companies competitive and bringing jobs back to the United States. It's also about putting more money in the pockets of average Americans with a middle income tax cut. So I've just returned from the Reagan Library, where I had the opportunity to speak on Sunday night. There's no better place to remind us of what we need to do here. It's been 31 years, and I look forward to working together with everybody in this room and others on getting this to President Trump to sign in December. Thank you.
Kellyanne.
Thank you very much, Senator. Mr. Secretary, this bill would help moms and dads and moms and pops as well. We are trying to help the job seekers to make it a more competitive environment, to find a secure and well-paying job in your field of choice. We're helping the job creators by reducing their burdens so that they can reinvest those monies into their companies, pay higher wages, keep jobs secure, create new jobs, and invest in inventory and plan for the future to be able to remain successful but also prosperous in this country. And then we're also trying to help the job holders, which represent the vast majority of American households. You know, when my grandfather had a job, when your grandfather had a job, the job was enough to support the whole family. Now we have households that have 2 and 3 jobs. Some are not worried about losing a job or replacing a lost job, but they have no idea why the job is no longer enough. Why are they white-knuckled at the end of each month to pay the rent or the mortgage, the tuition, or the student loan voucher payment? And we want to give them the much-needed relief that they deserve. This says tax cuts for American families, and that's right, but there are also a number of Americans who choose not to be married, choose not to have children, they too will find relief. We're trying to respond to the changing demography of this country as well. In terms of repatriation, it's incredibly important that Americans understand that we have trillions of dollars of wealth and many jobs parked illegally overseas. And it's time to bring that home, make it more fair, make it more competitive. The current tax code already benefits the wealthy and the well-connected. They hire accountants and attorneys. Some of them even hire lobbyists to help them change the code or navigate the code to their advantage. This is meant to make it simpler and buy back that money and that time that we spend each year just complying with the code. And finally, we want to invigorate and inspire all those would-be job holders and would-be entrepreneurs in this country to feel like in a more competitive environment where economic growth and a robust market economy allows them to realize their version of the American dream. So to the taxpayers, the property owners, the business owners, the homeowners, this is for you. Thank you.
Pete Sell.
How would all of us like billions of hours of our time back? Billions of dollars more in our pockets, billions in tax savings, a more competitive, growing economy. That's what tax reform is all about. It's delivering on promises that have long been made but not always followed through on. It would be very tempting for us here in Washington to say, we can afford to wait another year on comprehensive tax reform, perhaps just shave a bit off the tax rates, go home and declare a victory. The problem is, by standing still or even making an incremental change, we are falling behind with the rest of the world. Other countries, from the UK to France, are reducing their tax rates. Regulations already embedded in the law are going to impose more paperwork burdens on Americans. It's time to reverse this course, deliver on tax savings, an average of $1,300 for a median income family, put more money in those families' pockets due to economic growth, an average of $2,500. These are real savings and real boosts to the average family's economic circumstances. We cannot afford to wait to take the action on tax reform that will deliver those benefits. Thank you.
I noticed that one of our sponsors today sneaked in. I missed him. I don't know how I do that, but Senator Cruz is here.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Tax reform is absolutely critical. A major tax cut is absolutely critical, and I believe we will get it done. We will see the House come together, the Senate come together to deliver results on this. Tax reform should follow three critical goals. Number one, front and center, jobs and economic growth. This should be all about jobs, jobs, jobs. More jobs, higher wage-paying jobs, more opportunity for Americans working to achieve the American dream. Number two is simplicity. The more simplicity, the better. There is power in bold simplicity. And number three is fairness. We should be treating the American people fairly, not picking winners and losers in Washington. Now, I want to commend the House of Representatives for rolling out the initial draft of their plan last week. I think it was a good step. It was a positive step. There are many good elements of that plan. Cutting the corporate rate to 20% is a good element. Allowing expensing of capital expenditures is a good element. Allowing and encouraging American companies to bring capital back to America to invest and create new jobs, that's a good element. All of those, I hope, will be part of what is ultimately passed. I will say that one of the tasks going forward is that in the House and the Senate, I think we need to do even more to provide a tax cut, not just tax reforms, but a tax cut to every American, to working men and women. I think there is a path forward that actually the President laid out last week, which is repealing the individual mandate, the IRS tax, from Obamacare. The IRS tax, the individual mandate from Obamacare, is profoundly unfair. Each year, the IRS fines about 6 million people because they don't have enough money to afford health care. Roughly 80% of the people getting fined by the IRS make $50,000 a year or less. Roughly 40% make $25,000 a year or less. In my home state of Texas, you've got about 1 million people a year getting fined by the IRS. So here's their situation. You got a single mom who's working, trying to make ends meet. She doesn't have enough money to purchase health insurance because Obamacare has driven health insurance through the roof. And on top of that, the IRS fines her because she doesn't have enough money to purchase health insurance. That is profoundly unfair. We need to repeal that. It's good policy, but here's the particular silver lining for tax reform. The Congressional Budget Office scores that repeal as saving over $400 billion, all of which I believe should be put directly into lowering tax rates on individuals. This draft does a good job on the corporate and business side. We need to do every bit as good a job on the individual side, lowering rates so that every American, so that if you're a single mom waiting tables, you get a tax cut. If you're a school teacher in upstate New York, you get a tax cut. If you're a farmer in Iowa or Nebraska, you get a tax cut. If you're a refinery worker in southeast Texas, you get a tax cut. Every American, every family, every individual sees a real tax cut to make it easier to provide for your needs. If we do that, it'll produce jobs, it'll produce economic growth, and it'll produce fairness for every American. That's our objective, and I believe we're going to get it done.
We also have Grover Norquist from the Americans for Tax Reform.
Thank you. There's a classic Saturday Night Live routine where Dan Aykroyd and his wife are arguing over whether something is a floor wax or a delightful dessert topping. And those of you of a certain age know it was both. This is a jobs bill and a see, you were watching the show. I love that. This is a jobs bill. It's a tax cut. It is a pro-growth energy for the economy, and it is tax reform. It is both, and it's important that it do both as we move forward. There's an old story about the sculptor who was standing next to his beautiful statue of Zeus, and somebody came up and said, "How did you get the beautiful marble statue of Zeus?" And he said, "Well, I started with a block of marble, and I took away all the parts that didn't look like Zeus." So there's Zeus. Mm-hmm. How do we get a less stupid tax code? We look at the tax code, and we start taking out stupid. The Chinese, socialist China, is at 25% tax on businesses. We're at 35. Okay, stupid. Let's not be there. We have a higher tax code than our friends in Canada and in Britain. Let's take our rates down. 20 is a good start. It is significantly less destructive than 35. We have a lot of American earnings stuck overseas because our tax code doesn't let it come back to the country without punitive taxes. Stupid. A stupid that most of the rest of the world avoids. Let's end that and allow people to bring money back here to create jobs and opportunities in factories here in the United States. We have higher taxes on self-employed people and subchapter S corporations and many of the smaller businesses that employ over half the country, higher tax rates than we do on C Corps. C corporations hire the other half of the country. Stupid. Let's take those both down and get them more even so we don't discriminate against partnerships and some subchapter S corporations. This is a tremendous first start. I'll end simply by pointing out it is a first start. There will be a tax cut every year that there's a Republican House, Senate, and President. This is year one. If there's something that isn't, if there's stupid that you see that is still there at the end of the House having their very nice bill, and since I'm on the Senate side, I'm sure the Senate will much improve it. And when they get it together, we'll have something that is much less destructive than the tax code we have today. But there will be things yet to be done. There'll be a tax cut and further tax reform every year into the future, as long as we have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican President. And I think that when we'll get to 15, we may not be at 15 just yet, but we'll get to 15 on the corporate rate, and we'll work on getting those higher rates down as well. Thank you.
Dan Holler with Heritage Action.
Good morning. Thanks all for being here. It's really exciting to see the Republican Party and the conservative movement so united on something so foundationally important to the American people. And as you've heard, the House put a really good first step forward, and it's encouraging that all the senators here today want to build and improve on that and make it even better for the American people. there's one thing that I think could stand in the way of that happening, and you see it a lot from congressional Democrats who have a sudden interest in the debt and deficit. This is a new concept for them, but they're going to go take a run at it and see if it can work. I want to encourage everybody to think about and understand what we're actually doing in tax reform. Part of the goal is simplification, absolutely. The other part is making sure the federal government is confiscating less of people's hard-earned money. And if you look at it, the federal government is collecting more revenue as a percentage of the economy than it has historically after World War II. So we are at sort of high levels relative to where we have been. It's good to give that money back to the American people. And the concern about debt and deficit, the way we fix that is to give economic stability and certainty to the American people. Only when Americans know that their jobs are secure.
This is a Fox 10 News Alert.
All right, folks, we are stepping away from that conference, taking you out locally here in Arizona. This is in Chandler, where we have fire crews on a scene. This is 1 East Boston Street, and it comes back to the address of Modern Margarita, the restaurant. You can see that the crews here, several of them, have gained entry into this restaurant, and you can see just a little bit of smoke coming out of those doors, but we see no action on the roof, so that's a good sign there right now. But you can see, once again, this is a live breaking news alert right here in Chandler, Arizona, where the fire crews on the scene as they are investigating a fire that looks to be at this restaurant, Modern Margarita, 1 East Boston Street. You can see right now, looks like it's in a total knockdown mode though, so that's a good sign there for that business owner as well as the other business owners in that area. You know, you never want to hear about a fire happening at your establishment, but looks like the good folks of Chandler Fire really came together and was able to put whatever was out there away pretty fast. You can see the water there on the ground there from the fire hoses as they were able to knock down that fire pretty quickly. We don't see any smoke coming out of that building right now. It was just very minimal when Sky Fox first came to the scene here. But once again, just shows you our great first responders here. You just never know what kind of event that they are going to go to, what their day is going to be like, and how it's all going to unfold. But that's why all of our first responders are so great, as they come to a situation always when we are in most of need, and they're able to help the situation. This time happening to be a fire at a restaurant, and you can see here now they are in an investigative mode after this fire has been knocked down. You can see if there's anybody on the roof right now checking to see. Nope, we don't see anybody on the roof here. But Sky Fox is at the scene right here, 1 East Boston Street in Chandler. If you are just joining us here on News Now, remember, we take feeds from all over the country. And remember, even when breaking news is occurring, we've got you covered right here. Now we see that the firefighter is going to make his way up to that roof to do some investigation as well. You can see there we got about 6 firefighters there on the scene, and then looks like more in the shot that you can't see. Sky Fox would widen out a little, but they're sending the firefighters there up on the roof now to investigate, make sure there's no other pockets of smoke coming from this building right now. But always a situation when you hear about a restaurant fire, it's never be good because you figure they have so much fuel in there. But right now they're taking a look of what might have happened here. When you're looking at this roof here, it looks like something happened in this area. And that's what fire crews are trying to get a handle on and see, okay, what exactly happened here. You can see part of that roof looks like it, I don't know, maybe have caved in just a little bit. Looks uneven at that portion there where that firefighter is at. We'll continue to monitor this for you right here on News Now. Again, folks, welcome to the Fox 10 News Now stream, part of fox10phoenix.com, taking a live look here of a fire investigation in Chandler. And welcome back here to News Now. Scott Fox in Chandler for this fire investigation. The address is at 1 East Boston Street. This is the Modern Margarita restaurant here, and you can see they have several crews here on the scene. They also have some on the roof of this restaurant as they are investigating right now. You can see the water there down on the ground. So they had their hoses out, and you see the hoses there, and they went inside the restaurant. So right now they're in a total investigative mode at this point. So that's the good news here, because when you're talking about a business or any type of fire, you want the crews to come in there and just really just be able to knock it down and not have any problems after that. So that right now they're just in this full investigative mode. You see some of the fire crews coming out there checking on that roof as well. We'll see if Sky Fox can show us the roof again. There we go. So you have more of the fire crews there on from the last time you saw this picture, and looks like they're moving some of these AC units to see what exactly may have started this fire here. That's why we always got to thank our first responders, because they wake up, they do not know what kind of event that they're going to be going on to. You know, paramedics, firefighters, they don't know what kind of call that is going to be, but boy, do they come when the time is ready for them, don't they? I mean, when it is time for them to be there, they're there, and they're always there at your biggest time of need. And now these crews looking really at these AC units at this time, wanting to see, okay, where did this fire start? Because it looks like they have an area pinpointed where they think this all could have happened here. You can see where it's directly above where they might have had an incident below, maybe some smoke coming from the ceiling or the vents there, and they want to make sure about these AC units at this time here. You can see also the crews there on the ladder as well, getting a aerial advantage. This allows them to kind of survey the damage from high above, just like how Sky Fox is doing for us. They don't get the liberty of a helicopter, but they do get that nice ladder truck there to kind of see high above for the officials there that are on the roof. So we got a lot of crews here on the scene right now. Investigative mode here at 1 East Boston Street. If you're just joining us here on News Now, welcome. We are on a news alert for you in Chandler at this Modern Margarita restaurant where the crews, looks like they're fully coming out of that restaurant. We don't know if it might have happened in the kitchen or some area of that restaurant where they saw smoke coming, maybe from the vents or other areas. So it's always good, though, to know that when you call, these crews are going to be there for you, and they're going to be there for your business as well. If you're another business owner in this area, you might want to check out your utilities at this time too. So that could be a good wake-up call for other businesses to see, okay, what can we do to be a little proactive here, you know? Kind of get before something like this might happen. Now, we don't know exactly what happened, but that's why the investigators there are on scene to make sure everything is all right. Well, we'll continue to monitor this, and if I get any update for you, of course, we'll pass it along to you, but it looks like this situation is wrapped up, and that's the good thing there. Crews were able to knock down the fire, and now they're going to be able to see exactly where was that smoke coming from and why did it happen. Taking you now back out to Republicans talking about the big GOP tax cut bill that President Trump wants signed and delivered by Christmas.
They want to serve their customers. They represent so many other small businesses around the state of Indiana and around this country. If we want to continue to grow jobs in this country, if we want those businesses, like my business, to compete for workers so that their wages rise, if we want rank and file Americans to be able to keep more of their hard-earned money, then we must act now. This is our opportunity. And our lodestar, our guiding light should be to make sure that every American can keep more of their hard-earned money. Let's get to work. Let's get this done.
Thank you. John Hogan.
Thank you, David. We're talking about empowering hardworking Americans. We're talking about empowering small business. I come from an ag state. There's 16 million people in this country that are either involved in farming and ranching or indirectly involved in farming and ranching. And that's the epitome of small business. You're talking family business when you're talking farming and ranching. And so when we look at this tax cut, it's not just about making sure that people keep more of their hard-earned dollars after tax, the hardworking American taxpayers, but it's really about empowering, energizing, and injecting capital into small business across this country. And small business is the backbone of our economy. And so as we work on this, we want to make sure that that's exactly what we're doing. We're making sure that they have more capital to invest in their farm, in their ranch, in their small business, in plant and equipment. Because then what do? They hire more people. When they hire more people, there's a demand for labor. And when there's a demand for labor, what happens? Wages and income go up. So for every hardworking American out there, it's not just about keeping more of your money after tax. It's about raising wages and income in this great country.
Senator John Kennedy.
Thank you, David. This is what tax reform is about. This is all it's about. There are two groups of policymakers I have found in Washington. And I'm not talking about Democrats and Republicans. There are those who believe, as I do, and we do, in more freedom. And there are those who believe in more free stuff. This bill's about freedom. It's about allowing individuals and American businesses to keep more of the money they earn. I believe, and I think many of my colleagues here believe, that people and businesses can spend the money they earn better than government can. And that's all this legislation is about. For an individual, a mom and dad getting up every day, going to work, obeying law, paying their taxes, trying to do the right thing by their kids. It's about giving them more freedom by giving them more of their money and letting them keep more of their money. For our business women and our businessmen, it's about incenting them to take that extra money and invest in new plants and new machinery and new equipment and new software. Now, what is that going to do? It's going to create jobs, but for the current employees, it's going to make them more productive and cause wages to go up. I happen to believe, and I think history bears me out, that a country cannot tax.
All All right, folks, just an update here. Looks like we do have a crew there on the scene. Our very own Ty Brennan is at the scene in Chandler. He's getting ready for his hit coming up, Fox 10 News at noon. So you might want to check that out at the top of the newscast for a live update there. Our very own Ty Brennan there in Chandler for that fire. Well, that's going to do it for us here on News Now Today. Thank you so much for being part of the show. Thank you. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us on the morning session here of News and Now. We'll be back a little bit later with more News Now coverage. Thank you so much.